Okay. Okay, everyone. I'll get started in just a minute here. My dog is snoring really loud right now. She's on the couch beside me, so I have such a small apartment. It's hard to like have a station set up. Uh, I'll talk about later just some of the changes that I'm hopefully going to make. Trying to get a bigger place to be able to do videos like this, a better setup, things like that. But for the time being, it's cozy, and I got the snoring guy next to me, or girl, I guess. So hopefully it's not too annoying for everyone. It's funny, I do these videos, and easily there's 10 times more interest anytime my dog like walks by or something than anything I have to say, which does a lot for your ego when just your fat dog walking on a couch is more entertaining than, and probably more informative than anything I have to say. So I'll get started here in just 1 second. So this is probably the least prepared I've been for a video, but I have good reasons. Like, the holidays are crazy. I do home health care. It's a tough time in the home health care field because a lot of the people, it's difficult for them, the people we care for, to meet up with families and things like that. And so you end up doing a lot of overtime trying to make people's holidays good. So it went really well for me. I'm really happy, but I just kind of got off yesterday finally and been trying to, hang out with my family. And tonight I'm excited. I'm going to see the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which will be the first time I've ever seen them. But I'm a big fan, so go listen to some Christmas music in Pittsburgh. And as a result, I haven't really put a lot of effort into preparing for this, so it's probably not going to be one of my longer videos and probably not even one of my better videos. Now, you might be saying, can the quality of these videos and live streams actually go down? Yes, it can. I might be able to prove it today. So the other thing you may have noticed is the wife finally made me trim up. So I'm kind of indifferent. Like, one of my favorite, I love Seinfeld. I love Curb Your Enthusiasm. One of my favorite episodes is where in Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry's wearing this like lady sun hat on the beach. And his friend Jeff's just like, dude, what are you doing? You look ridiculous. And he's just like, I'm married. What do I care? Like, that's that's how I feel. So as far as like my beard and facial hair and all of that stuff, to me it's irrelevant. I don't care. You go to the haircut place and they're like, what kind of product do you put in your hair? I'm like, shampoo? They're like, no, like gel and stuff. I'm like, oh, no. I wake up and shower. That's my preparation for the morning. So, yeah, I know. All the power comes from the beard. I'll put some pictures up for me from before. I used to have a fantastic mane that came down to my shoulder. I had a beard that came down to like my gut. I think one of the first times my wife saw me was I didn't know her at the time, but we were eating chicken wings, and she said that I was a little inebriated, and I had taken the bones of the chicken wings and tied them into my beard. So, yeah, that's the kind of person that you're dealing with. So I'll start off with kind of I'm just a little tired. I was out a little late last night. Didn't get too drunk or anything, but this is something that I find over the holidays every year that I think's, oh, that's hilarious, drone tech. Yeah, I'll have to get in touch with you and find out why that happened. But yeah, like, I always find over the holidays, and I used to be one of these people, like, isn't it funny how you find, like, excuses to drink? So, like, my father-in-law, he found out that he had, like, some gout, and so he's looking online, and it's like, oh, cherry's something good that's good for gout. So it's like we're out trying to buy every liquor that has cherry in it, like, oh, if I just drink a bunch of this Red Stag whiskey, that'll cure the gout. And my friend last night's telling me, he's like, I recently found out that gin's like good for you. It's got juniper berries and it's supposed to be really good. And so it's like, I was the same way. It's like, yeah, I'm sure it means in moderation, right? Not like drinking a bottle of gin in one night. I think that the slight benefit you get from juniper berries or from the cherry in Red Stag is far outweighed by the total nonsense inebriation you get from downing the whole bottle. But that was That was last night. That was a conversation I had. Like, oh, gin, it's healthy for you. And at one point, I've gone up and down trying to lose weight my entire life. At one point, I had this theory. It was like, hey, don't drink beer. Just drink straight liquor and either mix it with water or just have water on the side or mix it with diet soda. That's far less calories than if you're drinking beers. Well, the problem is then you get absolutely smashed and end up ordering like 50 chicken wings at the middle of the night, getting up in the middle of the night trying to cook food, nearly burn the house down, things like that. So, yeah, it's really not the like I've always had a backwards sense on like health with stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, anything to excuse your bad habits, right? So, but yeah, thanks everyone that's here. I am a New Year's resolution. I am going to start. I got Diamond Dallas Page yoga. I was doing really good with it, but then like I pulled a muscle, like I think they call it like skiers thumb, but I pulled this muscle in my hand here, and so then I couldn't do like half the push-ups and yoga positions because it just felt like this incredible burning. So then I quit, and then I have this problem with like health where it's like I'm such a neurotic person that I'll do good for like 10 days in a row, but then I have one bad day. And so then it's like, wow, screw it. I did bad yesterday. I might as well do bad today. And so then, like, when you're coming up on the holidays, right around Thanksgiving, it's like, well, I know I'm going to have like 3 Thanksgiving dinners. So then the days in between that, I might as well be eating crappy too. Oh, now Christmas is coming up. I'm going to have all these Christmas. Well, I might as well just keep eating crappy. So I really am trying to buckle down. And yeah, I could be Resurrection of Jake the Snake style. Yeah, which is a great movie. Diamond Dallas Page Yoga. It's not like they sponsor me or anything, but it's fantastic. I really like it. I think it's good. So, all right, let's get on to some real stuff. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is kind of this phenomenon I've been noticing. So if you watch some of my previous videos, the live stream I did last week. Oh, and again, I apologize. I will be putting more videos up, be more consistent after the holidays. It's just, everyone knows it's tough around the holidays. So, and I will not be doing a live stream next Friday, probably because I think that I'm actually going to be working until Friday evening, so I probably won't be able to do it. But anyways, yeah, the Jake the Snake on Rogan was really good. He's what a tragic guy. Like I was a big, I don't watch professional wrestling anymore, but I used to. I was a big fan, and it's fascinating. The characters behind it. It's an absolutely fascinating thing to me. But I digress. Yeah, the Joe Rogan thing was good. So. Anyway, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was I was doing these videos on Mueller deleting these text messages. Now, just for a quick recap, there were the IG, who's the Inspector General Horowitz. He's kind of doing this investigation. His job's basically it's kind of like internal affairs with the police. Now, I'm way oversimplifying it, but if you're not a nerd like me that's just watching this stuff all the time, the idea is that he's supposed to be kind of looking in to make sure that everything's on the up and up with the FBI. This was actually requested by the Democrats, because if you remember, James Comey came out and basically gave a laundry list of why Hillary Clinton broke the law, and then said, but we're not going to recommend charges against her, and that infuriated both sides. The Republicans and the people who didn't like Hillary was like, wait a minute, you basically just proved all of this thing she did that was against the law and why she would be a terrible candidate for president. And so why shouldn't she be charged? And then the other side was like, but wait, if you're not going to charge her, it's not really FBI policy to come out and then air all this dirty laundry. And both sides were correct. I think she should have been charged. I could speak for 8 hours on that. But even if you're a Democrat, you have to be upset at Comey. So the Democrats demanded that this be looked into. So they're actually the ones that demanded an IG actually look into this. And now the IG then was like, okay, then we'll just look into everything. So he looked into the Hillary investigation. He's looking into the Trump-Russia investigation and making sure that things aren't shady. We'll see how it turns out. But in doing this, all kinds of information came to light. So already he issued his report on the Hillary investigation. And on that, he says that there was extreme bias and like incompetence going on at the FBI, but he couldn't really prove corruption. The only thing he did say was that they could not prove that the bias did not affect Strzok, who was one of the head agents, decision to allow Anthony Weiner's laptop to go uninvestigated, to basically sit there and not be investigated, in favor of going after Trump with Russia. And again, this gets really convoluted, but the thing with Weiner's laptop was just, it had emails, secured emails from Hillary Clinton on it. So why should this private person that's not involved in government anymore have classified emails on his computer? And so this is something that should have been looked into. But The corrupt FBI decided to sit on it until basically a whistleblower at the FBI went to higher ups and was like, look, we're sitting on all this evidence. What are we doing? That's why Comey had to announce begrudgingly, like 3 days before the election, oh yeah, we found these emails. Oh, but it's all clear now. It's all clear. And that's what people say caused the end of the investigation. But anyways, just know that the IG is the person who's looking into all this. So he's the one, when you hear of all these text messages coming out about Strzok and Page, where they're saying they need an insurance policy in case Trump wins the election, and he could smell Trump supporters in Walmart and all this other crap. That's where you're getting all this information from. It's from the IG's office, basically. He got access to all these texts. So, in a nutshell, here's what happened. There was the FBI issues phones to their employees. So Strzok and his lover Page, they're the ones texting back and forth about hating Trump, needing insurance policies. And there's all kinds of other relevant information in there where if you put in the timeline of what's occurring, like for example, they'll be talking about an article that's about to come out in a news source or an interview that's about to be done on CNN, things like that. And so you could line up what's like, oh, here's what was happening in real time and how they're discussing it. And you kind of see what's going on behind the scenes and how it was this entire system of like basically, I would argue, corruption or just inappropriateness, however you want to put it, that was going on behind the scenes in an effort to like really go after Trump. So they get these, the FBI issues these phones. They were Samsung Galaxy 5s, I believe. That's irrelevant. Just know they were Samsungs. And basically, at one point there was a glitch and a bunch of their text messages were supposedly deleted. And apparently the IG was like able to recover a lot of those texts. I'm not sure that they were able to prove they recovered all of them, but they recovered many of them. So that's shady in its own right. But okay, that's no smoking gun or anything. That could legitimately have happened. I find the timing of it to be suspect. The fact that it only affected, I think, 20% of people at the FBI, and it just so happened to affect both Strzok and Page. And it's also convenient because if they deleted one or two really damning text messages, it'd be hard for us to ever find out. But we'll just take it at face value for that. However, there was also a second phone that was given to Strzok and Page, and this is when they became members of Mueller's special counsel. Remember, Mueller and what he's doing, yes, he took over the FBI investigation into Russia collusion, but he's his own separate entity, and they have separate rules for what they're allowed to do, for their procedures on retaining information and evidence and things like that. So once Strzok and Page joined Mueller's team, they were actually given iPhones. So that's a separate phone. Okay, so they get these separate phones. The IG releases a report like 2.5 weeks ago where basically their office is saying, yeah, so we were able to recover some of the data from these Samsung phones. However, we were not able to recover any of the data from Strzok and Page for their use of their work phones on the Mueller team, which would have been crucial. The reason for this is that Mueller's team decided to factory restore the phones, basically wipe them clean. And they don't have a policy of retaining data, so therefore, supposedly, the data is totally missing. Now, people have told me, yes, but the service carrier would save the data. Well, according to this IG report, they contacted the service carrier, and they were like, we only retain data for 5 days, so it's been longer than that. So they don't have the data. Anyways, it seems like the data's missing, which is extremely damning because Mueller knew that the IG was looking for these text messages, and still decided to allow them to be deleted. So it's vast incompetence at best and horrible corruption at worst. I would go with the latter. Okay, so that's the story. It took me 10 minutes to get through it. What I'm not even referencing like the particulars of that story when I'm talking about this. What I wanted to talk about is it blows my mind how people could see objective reality and ignore it because it doesn't fit their narrative. Now, in this, I'm using this situation as an example, but I'll give more examples here. It doesn't have to be politics. It could be anything, right? In this particular example, it's politics. So I'm on websites like Above Top Secret or other places, or you're just talking to people in life. And you tell people this, like, hey, what do you think of the fact that Mueller's team wipe this data? I thought he was supposed to be this impartial guy. He's trying to get to the bottom of everything, so why would he delete potential evidence? And keep in mind, he knew the reason he fired Strzok was because of his inappropriate text with the FBI phone. So he knew that there would definitely be an interest in looking at what his text on the iPhone issued by Mueller would be. Yet he still gave the go-ahead to delete that evidence, right? So that's just an aside. So anyways, you present this and you're like, hey, what do you all think of this? And people read this, right? From the .gov site. It's not like Fox News. No, I will admit, at first I posted like Fox or something that just had a link directly to the government website right there. But that wasn't good enough for people. So it's like, okay, take Fox News out of it. Here is literally the .gov site. Here is literally the Inspector General's own words in his writing, right? here's what it says, and you post the part. Here, bam. He says he didn't get the data from the iPhones because it was wiped clean. And person after person after person, there's two reactions to this. The first is, and you see this all the time, and I understand this one better, which is you just ignore it, right? And the idea behind that is like, well, the news cycle moves so fast, if we just ignore it, it'll go away and we can pretend that the corruption didn't happen or the incompetence didn't happen. And when I go back and I look at my posts on some of these websites, like thread after thread after thread after thread, where I'm like, oh my God, this was a horrible thing that happened. I totally forgot that happened. Because you post it and you'll have some people that agree with you, like, yeah, that's devastating. I can't believe it. But almost none of the people that defend, like, that hate Trump or defend the corruption at these intel agencies, they'll just, we'll just ignore it. And then the thread dies and you move on to the next thing, you know. Instead, they'll participate in a thread that says, like, you know, all Trump supporters have the mentality of a fifth grader. That'll get a lot of response. People are ready to talk about that. You know, it's like, whatever. If you want to be childish and ignore facts, that's fine. You're right. At least I can understand that. But the second motivation is what I find truly mind-blowing, where they could read the words in black and white. And it's not like we're interpreting the Bible or something. This is plain everyday English, with the IG saying, yeah, we were in Mueller's team wiped this, we were unable to get data. And they look at that and go, yep, that proves that that proves that the IG got the data from these phones. And you're like, no, it literally says the exact opposite. Nope, it says he got the data. And you're like, how can you think that? And I'm like, oh, okay, you're getting confused because the paragraph above it says the Samsung phones that were issued by the FBI, they did recover some of that data. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the Mueller issued phones, the iPhones. They didn't get any of that data. And these people be like, no, stupid, read it again. It says they recovered the data from these Samsungs. Yes, I get it. They recovered from the Samsungs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the iPhone. Yep, I read it. It shows that they got the data from. How do you deal with that? That is just literally looking at sentences, like a paragraph, and saying it says the exact opposite of what it says. Any objective person, take politics out of it. It has nothing. You just read that and be like, okay, this is a guy saying we tried to get data on this phone and we were unable to get it. Any person could say that. If you were dropped, you know, in a time machine or you were an alien, you'd read that and be like, yep, I get it. Why? What's the political significance? Now, you could argue you don't think that's significant you could ignore it. You could say that it's not significant for a litany of reasons. But to just deny reality is unbelievable. And it happened. It's not one or two people. This is over and over and over and over again. And then the cherry on top of it is, it's not just enough to deny the reality. And I'll admit, I could get very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like petty and like snarky. But I don't mean it. I don't dislike people. In fact, some of the people I enjoy arguing with the most on those websites are in real life. Like, that's just, you know, it's not a good trait, but that's how I am. I'm having fun with it, you know? I'm not like if someone proves me wrong or we're having a political discussion where we really disagree, I love arguing. I love debating. So for me, it's like a fun thing. So I do apologize if I've ever argued with any of you watching and you're like, oh, this guy comes off as snarky. Yeah, Drone Tech, I would love to do a live stream with you at some point. I'll get in touch with you. Which I'll put my email up here and you can get in touch with me. But anyways, going back on this rant here, what I don't get is just the flat out, just the denial of reality. And then you start to, and then they start making these insults, right? Like, oh, you're always wrong. You're so stupid. That's what happens because you're Mr. Breitbart, Mr. Fox News. You're just in your little bubble. Once again, proving that you're always wrong. And it's like, oh my God, like, you're making these insults like this, and you're so objectively wrong. Like, it's so comical and yet, like, kind of frightening at the same point. Like, it literally reminds you of doublespeak from George Orwell, 1984, where it's the narrative they have in their head. Like, and some people are like, well, maybe they're just trolling. I'm assuming, but there are some trolls. But there's so many people that do this. I don't think it's all trolls. I think that there are people that have a narrative, right? And like, go back to the Kavanaugh hearings, right? And you kept hearing, and I recognize this because when I was in debate and we talked about postmodernism a lot, you would hear people like Cory Booker saying all the time, this was her truth. It is her truth, right? And that's the idea, is there is no truth. We all have our subjective truth. So the narrative is more important than objective truth. And that's what I think is infiltrating some of these people, where they just have this narrative of what like in this case, like politics, like Trump's a terrible person, or the intel community's always right. They're these noble people. And so any facts, reality that don't compute with that, they just flat out, they look at it and say, nope, no, that's wrong. That's just wrong. That black and white written there that everyone subjectively can see is wrong. And then when you try to even politely be like, no, I think you're confused. Let me put it again. Then they get embittered and they want to attack you and they're like, you're stupid. You're an idiot. Can't you see how you're just in a bubble? And it's ironic because everything they're saying is an exact reflection of themselves. It's like you're so in a bubble. Like, you could hate Trump and see that and say, okay, Mueller, delete these phones. I don't think it's a big reason because I trust Mueller. I'm sure there was no data on that phone that was damning to Strzok and Page. No, I would disagree, but at least you're making an argument that's not denying reality. But to just outright deny reality and then, smugly like chortle, you're so stupid. Look at you. You don't deny reality with me, so you're such a moron. It's truly fascinating. Like, I don't know what to say. And like, so let me give you some examples. These are situations I've had occur in my life. As someone who was into debate, back when I was doing it, you would like go to parties and stuff, and I feel like it's like anything. Like if you're a mechanic and you're going out to the bar, there's probably a good chance that you don't want someone sitting there being like, hey, I have a 72 Toyota and it's having this problem. What do you think about this? You're like, hey, man, I'm just trying to drink, watch the game or whatever. And so I think it's like any hobby or career, like at some points you just want to forget about it. So when I did debate all day, like it's brutal to compete at the top levels of debate. Not to brag, but this is a little brag. Most people that did policy debate like I did in college did it all through high school. I never did. So I'm trying to catch up to these people that are some of the smartest people you ever, like people with photographic memories and things like that. Really smart people. So I'm just trying to hang with them. So it's taking a lot of energy and stuff. But, I certainly in college, I'm not going to deny I liked partying. And so I'm at this party and you would hear this all the time. Oh, you're a debater. Let's have a debate. And you're like, yeah, I don't want to have a debate. Like, if you're just organically talking and a discussion comes up, that's one thing. With someone coming up, like, and I had a friend who did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He used to get this all, oh, let's roll around. You think you're tough? I bet I could pit, and it's like, dude, no. We're just trying to have fun. So I would get this all the time, and it was very, I see what you're saying, Jay. Yeah, call it the educated people in college. But honestly, a lot of them were smart that were in debate. Sometimes too smart for their own good, to be honest, but I digress. Anyway, so I'm at this party once, and this girl comes up to me, and she's just like, oh, you're a debater, let's have a debate. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. And I don't know her. And I'm like, I'm just there with kind of a different group. I didn't know her group really, and she kept going on, and finally I'm like, what do you want to debate about? And she's like, politics. And this was probably 2008, maybe around there. And she's like, did you vote for Barack Obama? And I was like, no, actually I voted for Ron Paul. And she's like, oh, you're a racist. And I was just like, what? And so it was one of those things. It's like, okay. And I was like, look, I'm basically anti-war. And I was like, I see the people that are around Obama, and I feel like even though he didn't vote for the Iraq War, I feel like Ron Paul was the person that was the most against it, and that's why I voted for Ron Paul primarily. There were a bunch of other reasons, but, I'm not trying to get really detailed with this lady. I'm just trying to get out of there. And she's like, no, all the Democrats were against the war. And I was like, actually, a lot of Democrats, not Obama himself, but a lot voted for the war or supported it. And she's like, yeah, but they are all appointed by Bush. And I was like, no, I don't mean like cabinet members and stuff that happen to be Democrat. I mean like your senator, I think, who's our senator? It was Pennsylvania, so it'd be like, our senators in our state, if we at that point we didn't have Democratic Senate. But you see what I'm saying? I'm like, the senators you get to vote for. A lot of the Democrats that were voted in the office actually supported the Iraq War. And she's like, no, that's not how it works. The senators are appointed by Bush, whoever the president is. And I'm like, by the way, she keeps threatening me though. Oh, you won't debate me because I'm smarter than you when it comes to politics. And so I'm like, so just to clarify, your argument is that all of our senators and our congresspeople, we don't vote for them. We just vote for the president, and the president appoints those people. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, get out of my house. Because it was in my house. I was like, I can't talk to you. I'm so enraged right now. And she just didn't believe it. Like, I'm like, how do you prove to someone that... I'm like, here's an article on the computer that says you get to vote for congresspeople. No, that's not true. Just an outright denial. Now, you might be like, well, maybe she was drinking. Maybe that's why. But that's the type of mentality I'm talking about. Like, there's no conversation to be had. You're so arrogant and so objectively wrong, there's nothing to say. I've had arguments where, look at like sports. You'll have an argument with someone, and this isn't all alcohol related. Like, this could just be, I vividly remember having a discussion with someone where it was like, they're telling me the Yankees won the World Series the year before. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. I think it was a couple years ago they won. No. So, you pulled up on someone's phone or whatever, and it's like, see, the Yankees didn't win last year. It was actually this team. No, that article's wrong. Okay, well, this is MLB.com. It's got, like, literally every World Series winner, like, in history, and it has them. Nope, that's wrong. Okay, well, here's, like, the newspapers from, like, the New York newspapers talking about, the Yankees losing and how they're going to rebuild next year. No, that's all wrong. And I'm an idiot for believing it. Then it amps up. No, you're just stupid. It's like this denial of reality. Like, I don't know if it's a mental health issue or what, but it's unbelievable. And what's in the political realm, what I'm talking about with this Mueller issue specifically, is a lot of the people that are doing this, like, I might disagree with them routinely, but they've had what I thought was productive conversations with me. Even if we disagree, it's like, you could tell there's intelligence there. They're not someone on the street, in a tinfoil hat that's just totally ignoring reality. And so I don't get it. I like it, you start to question all the conversations you've had with that person. Like, when I was talking with them and thought I was having an informative conversation on this other topic, were they just denying reality again? Do I need to go back and check and make sure that this wasn't some insane conversation, on their part? I don't know. It's just, but I really think that it's something like, if you were a psychologist or something, it would be fascinating. And I know, like, all the cliches, like, what was it, someone in Stalin's camp or Hitler's camp that was like, the bigger the lie you tell, the more people are willing to believe it. And, like, there's a lot of that. And I think that a lot of it's to blame with, like, the way our, like, getting back to you, Jay, like, yeah, the way our education systems are set up. They are set up a lot to be indoctrination now. You don't want conflicting opinions. It's all about how can I agree better, and it's all about narratives. It's about your truth. It's not about, the objective truth. Everything centers on you and what you feel, and things that don't compute with that. Well, it's not that you're the problem. It's everything else is the problem. And, like, it's truly fascinating, though, to watch it occur in real time. You're just like, wow, it's amazing. Now, the other part of that, which is the just ignoring, that's frustrating as well in a different way. But it's just like I don't know how many times. Why is it, like, there are totally, like, reasonable people that'll be like, I hate Trump, but yeah, there are things that have been done by the FBI or these investigators that I find shady as well. However, that doesn't exonerate Trump if he committed crimes. Totally agree. Yeah, that's a reasonable position to take, But just the outright ignoring, it's like, bam, here's something like just real. Do you think it was a good idea for Mueller to delete these texts? You can't get an answer from people, aside from the ones denying reality. The third possible answer you might get is like, oh, I'm sure the data's somewhere, so who cares if he deleted it? Do you think Trump would get that same benefit of the doubt? Yeah, sure, Mueller requested this evidence from me in the form of emails or phone records. I deleted them then because I figure, those records are somewhere. You think that would fly? You try that. If the only people who get away with that is people connected to Hillary. No problem destroying subpoenaed evidence, So, yeah, that was my little rant on that. So, I don't know. Now, I will say I was lucky that I didn't have any big political disagreements over the holidays, Thanksgiving. You hear these horror stories of, like, I can't even talk to people in my family. It's not like that. I got people in my family that really hate Trump. And the truth is, if you're really honest and you're willing to have, like ideals and thoughts, and those are more important to you than specific people, I think that it's easy to have conversations with even people that are perceived on the other side, right? So, like, in other words, what I mean is I support Trump, and there's a lot of what Trump does that I like. But more than I support Trump, I support ideals and policies and things like that. And so I'm really defending them when Trump's defending them. When Trump's not, when he bombed Syria, then I could easily criticize him because I'm not attached to the person. I'm not a team first player. And when I run for Congress, like, that's something that's probably difficult that the Republican Party might not want to hear from me. It's like, I am going to be running as a Republican, but I'm never going to be Republican first. I'm going to be country first. And that means that I'm not just going to toe a line. If I feel the Republicans do something I disagree with, then I'm not going to go along with it. So if you have that mentality, it's easy. You can relate to people that have different things. I could listen to people give me their criticism of Trump. Like maybe it's like one of the big ones you hear is like, he lies or he's immoral or he cheated on his wife. And it's like, yeah, those are all bad things. I agree. And you focus on that. And, maybe you could kind of, especially in a family setting, in a non-confrontational way, be like, yeah, fair enough. But, so did Hillary or so does the other side. But yeah, it's a problem in all of Washington that we need to deal with these lies. And so you could kind of like get some middle ground there. The straight up I'm lucky I didn't run into anyone personally that was so vested in the narrative one way or another that they're just denying reality in that way. And I noticed also when I put this thread up, I noticed that people were like, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like when, Trump said he would make the economy better and it didn't and people excuse him. Well, that's different, right? That's not what I'm talking about. There's all kinds of things that go into that equation, right? Like, you could still criticize. You could say Trump was bad for the economy, or he was wrong when he said he would achieve, 4% growth, and he didn't. Though so far he's doing pretty good in that. Though the stock market's been declining and volatile. Anyways, it's irrelevant. What I'm saying is, like, someone saying I'm going to get this wall built and then not getting it done because of a bunch of stuff happened. Like, you can call it out that they were wrong, or even say that they lied, and someone could reasonably be like, yes, but here's a bunch of reasons why that didn't get done. That's different than just a straight up objective fact, right? Mueller they could not recover the text from the Mueller phones because Mueller's team deleted them. Fact, period. Mueller's team's not denying that. They talked to the IG and told him that. The IG's saying that. It's not just being reported on Fox News. This is an actual .gov report from the IG. It's black and white, period. It's not negotiable. You could say, well, I don't think it's a big deal, or, whatever. That's fine. But to just straight up deny the reality, that's different than, because a lot of people are trying to agree with me, like, yeah, it's like Trump supporters, like, Mexico's going to pay for the wall. It's like, yeah, but that was different. He's saying through a series of, like, trade agreements and things like that, we would make more money from Mexico that would end up paying for the wall. Like, that's different than just, the equivalent would be, like, if you're talking to a Trump supporter, right, and they're like, and you're a Trump hater, and you said, hey, Trump said he was going to get the wall built, right? Well, what's up with that? The wall's still not built. And the Trump supporter says, yeah, the wall is built. And the person disliking Trump's like, well, no, there's small parts that were kind of already there. A little bit's been done, but overarchingly, he hasn't got the wall. That's why he's requesting funding. That's what the government shutdown's about. No, it's built. And then the person's like, but wait a minute, here's all these articles that blatantly show it's not built. Here are literally pictures of the border showing there's no wall there. And the person goes, the Trump supporter's like, yeah, all of that proves my point. The wall is built, and you're a moron. This is just indicative of how stupid you are thinking the wall is not built. That's the kind of insanity I'm talking about. You would just be like, how can you even have this discussion? The wall's not there. You could literally walk there and see that the wall's not there. But this person is absolutely that proof to them that the wall isn't there. It's just merely more proof to them that the wall is there. That's the exact same with this Mueller situation. It says in black and white, the texts were deleted. The IG was not able to recover them. And people are just like, you're wrong. That proves that the IG was able to recover them. And Mueller didn't delete the text. Oh, it's so frustrating. But, all right. Moving on. Let me recheck the chat here real quick. So I wanted to talk about the two immigration stories that you see coming out. Again, I didn't do a lot of news watching or anything this week, so just a cursory glance. So I don't know the very specifics of these two cases, but the one was the sad case of this child apparently dying in custody at the border. And the other is that there was a story about an illegal immigrant that I think shot and killed a cop, and he's still on the run. So I think both of these stories, like, let's just take them at face value. But it's interesting how they're both used to kind of push a narrative, like the conflicting narrative, like, the noble illegal immigrant and the terrible bureaucracy of ICE and border control on one side, and on the other side, the noble bureaucracy that's just trying to keep our country safe, and the horrible illegal immigrant that killed people. Like, we all should step back and understand that both of these are extremes. This isn't indicative of the average case, whether it be children dying in custody or an illegal immigrant murdering. Now, you might say, well, actually, there's a lot of crime committed by illegals, or actually a lot of children are treated really poorly. That might be true, but I'm just saying it's like sometimes it just kind of, the way this stuff's propagandized on all sides, I'm just like, I don't know. It's like, I get what you're trying to do, because it's hard to have a logical discussion about this. Emotions run so high, and people are just constantly bashing you, trying to appeal to your emotions, instead of just when it comes to the border and the wall and things like that, I want to approach it more of like a logical position. Because what happens when you start talking about like making policy based purely off emotion, you end up with like situations that are unattainable, and it ends up making things worse. So, it's easy. Like, you could point to me to, like, let's just take immigration out of it, right? Like, here's like the real world situation I've dealt with that's like that. So, like, you want a dog and you go to the pound and you see like 50 dogs, and everyone, you're like, this is so freaking sad. I wish I could take all 50 of these dogs. And if you look at it on a case-by-case basis and you're like, here's dog one. This dog deserves a home, right? I should take this dog. Yes, okay, I'm taking it. Here's dog two. How isn't that at some point I have to say, like, I can't take any more dogs, because my ability to care for any one of them will be so diminished because I can't take care of 50 of them. So you kind of, you have to have a pragmatic way to look at it. Like, immigration's the same way. You could take and I'm not likening illegal immigrants to dogs. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, you could take any specific, like, probably, I'm assuming, like, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that most illegal immigrants that are trying to come here are just trying to do, like, make more money or do the best thing for their family or themselves, which I don't begrudge that. Even, and I think it's funny that, like, a lot of, like, the working age men, like, there'll be a lot of younger guys. Most of the caravans and illegal that we see, it seems to be working age guys, Hey, man, if they're here for economic reasons and they want to do better, I don't think that they should be allowed in just for that. I don't think they're refugees. But who could begrudge that person for wanting to have a better life if they're really here to work? So you could look at all these on a case-by-case basis and be like, yeah, I sympathize with that person. And, like, I do. I do think this is the greatest country in the world. I do think that I'm extremely lucky to be born in this time, in this place. And I don't begrudge people who want that for themselves. But, having said that, there's a process. We have to have laws. Our country needs to be, like, control who we let in. And just like you and your home need to be able to control what comes into your home. Because if you were just looking at it emotionally, then you just say, okay, no borders, like you see a lot of people saying, or some indeterminate amount of illegals we need to leave in. They should all be made legal, but they don't have a number, And then what's the system look like once 1 billion people come in? Well, then now we can't take care of any of those poor people. And who benefits in that situation? Well, the extremely wealthy, who now have this enormous pool of labor that are basically willing, because there's so much labor competition, that are basically going to be willing to work for pennies on the dollar. So yeah, they're happy about it. But do you think, that's why there's a lot of opposition to illegal immigration from legal immigrants, because they're like, look, I did it the right way. I spent years getting here. I spent a lot of money. It was a lot of work. I had to do a lot of research, But I love this country. That's why I came. And now I'm competing with the job for some guy that just walked across the border. Right? That's not right. And it's not. And our country should be looking out for its citizens first. And so you have to look at it pragmatically, not emotionally. However, the other side does the same thing, where it's just like, oh, this illegal shot and killed someone. That kind of shows. Now, I do think that there's, like, you could talk about, like, these policies, like this Oakland mayor that was kind of warning illegals before ICE came and raided them. Like, if that one of those people then kill people, that's worth criticizing that Oakland mayor over that. I totally agree with that. But in general, I don't think that that's a reason to be like, send them all back. To heck with all the DACA recipients. Send them all back because murderers. It's like, no, that's not indicative of the majority of them. So it's just funny how the emotional appeals come at it from both levels. And both sides do it. But I do think that, like, there's part of me that's like, and again, I'm biased, I fully admit that. So someone who's a Republican and leans on wanting more border security and thinking illegal immigration is a big problem, I lean towards that side, defending that side. And so with the Republicans, I think one of the problems they get into is they don't play the emotional game as well as the Democrats. Right? With the Democrats, so, like, and you can see it. I did a big write-up back in the conventions in 2016 where you had the Republican convention and then the Democrat convention. And the entire media narrative and the Democratic talking point was, oh, the Republican convention was so dark. oh, it was just gloomy and painted this terrible picture of America. Talked about crime and talked about the economy not doing as well as it should, and illegal immigration and veterans not getting benefits, just all dark stuff. Now the Democrats are all light and fluffy, but then you watch the Democrats and they're all like, we're going to be dead from climate change in the next 100 years. Trump's like this racist. He's dog whistling to racists. His supporters are deplorable people. They don't want the skin color to change in this country. It's like, how's that? Somehow that's not dark. That message wasn't dark. Or the constant bashing of, you turn on any news channel, a mainstream media, newspaper, or anything, and it's constantly about how we're on the verge of nuclear war because Trump's this crazy maniac and he's probably a stooge of Putin, and, but at the same time he's an oaf and his finger's on the button, and, that's not dark. Like, to them, that's not dark. So they play these emotional games really well. The Democrats are good at it, and so you do have to, you have to couch your argumentation in, logic, and the pragmatic solutions why it could work, but you also have to have emotional appeals, right? Which is why, I had this discussion with a person. I was like, I think that the caravans and legal immigration is a big deal, and this person I'm discussing this with doesn't, because they want all these people to come in and be able to vote, and I'm trying to assume this person has the best of intentions, but I think secretly there's probably a lot of I want a demographic shift, which for me it's I could care less. The fact that I happen to be Caucasian or white means just about nothing to me. I don't really care. I don't care people's ethnicity or skin color. I care about their ideals. I care about, what they think this country is. What does it mean to be American? That matters to me. Your skin color, your religion, sexual preference. I don't care about any of that. So I care less. All these white nationalists. What would you do if you woke up and your grandkids were in a world, a country where they're a minority? There's only 5% white. So I don't care at all. It makes no difference to me. But anyways, I think that a lot of people that levy that accusation, that say oh, you're worried about demographic shifts, are secretly letting you see a little insight to themselves. They're yes, we want the demographic shift. They can't prove it, but in the back of my head. But I'm still trying to argue in good faith. And it's illegals, and it's this constant trope. I'm willing to listen to the argument that illegals are as good of people as me or any other American. Totally believe that. Having said that, our country's supposed to work for us, American citizens and legal residents, and so it doesn't matter. It's not a test of morality or anything, or a test of worth of a person. It's just, if you work for Coca-Cola, I'm sure you understand that the people that work for Pepsi are just as good as a person as you, but you don't want Coke saying, we're going to give half of our pensions to the Pepsi people. You're like, whoa, that's not your job here at Coke. Your job's to look after us that work at Coke. Well, the same idea. By saying that, I'm not saying people in other countries are inferior or were born less than, they were just born in a different area than me. That's it. Anyways, so you get this argument when you're arguing about that, where there's this drive for people to be oh, well, the illegals are better than the native population in this way. For example, they commit less crime than native population. Garbage. Those stats are absolutely garbage. The actual what they do is they'll take state crimes that are prosecuted in Texas or Arizona, and then they have no idea how many illegals there are, but they still then will make the claim, we know proportionally illegals commit less crime than native. It's just not true. There's no way to prove that. Even if you could prove, first off, they're here illegally, so that's a crime. Many of them, and you might say, well, that's not a serious crime. Okay, well, a lot of them have stolen people's identities, and that is a serious crime. If you've ever known anyone that's been a victim of it, it could devastate your life. So that is a serious crime. That happens with a lot of illegals, but they want to whitewash over that. And it's just no. So if one, you're just wrong on the factual basis of that, as actual better studies have showed. But second, what is that supposed to mean? And also, here's a little aside of that. Are we allowed to now start using demographics and crime statistics? Is that not... Because the same left that'll say that, right? That's look at these studies that show that actually illegals commit less crime than native population. He was okay, well, let's break down the native population then, right? Can we break that down based on things like gender, race, sex, age, right? Let's start breaking that down. Of course not, because all of a sudden that's racist. If you're talking about police brutality, because, this is getting off on the side, but my argument with police brutality is look, the police are probably going to respond with more force, both correctly and incorrectly, in situations, in areas where they know they are more likely to have serious crime or force be used against them. So if you're in the inner city, doesn't matter the skin color of the people. I'm not saying that. If you're in the inner city as a cop, you're probably more likely to have an itchy trigger finger or be worried about your life and either make a mistake or do something corrupt, whatever, than if you're in my little rural town where it's like nothing really ever happens like that. So there's less likely to be gross examples of like unarmed people being shot. And it just so happens that the way the population, I don't think it's a genetic thing or anything like that. It just so happens in a lot of these neighborhoods where extreme crime rates and poverty occur, it happens to be African American neighborhoods. Now there could be very good reasons. You could say, well, wait a minute, that the government set up that case. That could be true. We could have that discussion, right? But let's be fair that those neighborhoods, there's more likely to be violence from the cops. That's all I'm saying. And to even cite those statistics, you're just like, you're a racist, you're a racist. No, I'm not a racist at all. I'm not saying that you take the same black people, you put them in my town, they're not going to commit more crime or anything. I'm not saying that. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that area. That's it. That's all I'm saying. And to just be willing to say that's racist to even bring that up. But then, when those same type of stats benefit the people on the left, they say, oh, the illegals are actually, these crappy native-born people, they're so crime-ridden. Now the illegals, they commit less crime. So it's like, well, make up your mind. Are we allowed to use these statistics or not? I happen to think that you should be allowed to use all statistics when it comes to things like that. Facts aren't bigoted or racist or anything like that. How you use them can be. If I cite, black crime statistic and say, this proves black people are inferior, then yes, I'm a racist. I'm using facts to be a racist. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to explain a nuanced argument as to why the police interactions with African Americans could lead to more of these escalating situations proportionally. That's all I'm trying to do. That's not saying that none of the cops should ever be at fault or none of the, that we should treat black people different or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying it's better than just shouting racism, because as long as we continue to shout that, the problem will never be solved. Cops are going to be like, the majority of cops are like, we're not racist. You're treating us like the enemy. We're just going to tune out what you're saying. And the other side of the argument is going to be like, yep, that explains it all, racism. And so you don't look at like real problems that could lead to real solutions. That's all I'm saying. So I find this whole, when you're talking of illegal immigration and people are quick on the left to jump on the stats, illegals commit less crime. It's like, be careful. You're opening up a can of worms, because you're by de facto saying it's all right for people to split up in demographics and make demographic crime arguments. So there's that. And I'll get to more of this. And actually, this wasn't something I planned on talking about. Well, I guess I'll just get to it now. I'll come back to illegal immigration in a minute. But another thing that, like, when you discuss, and I was kind of discussing this with my friend Aaron, who we did the live stream, this is one of the problems I have with, like, cultural Marxism or intersectionality. And what I mean by that is, like, have you ever noticed that, like, the feminists are on the side of, like, regimes like Saudi Arabia or Iran, where, like, these extreme, like, Islamic places where women's rights are way less than we have now, but they always seem to be on the same side. The same with, like, gay rights, the LGBT community. They seem to be defending. Well, it's because of what's called intersectionality, which is the idea of the world is made up of oppressors and oppressed, and you're defined by your group. So, and any line of your group you could take. So, for example, you could take race. If you're a certain race, then you're an oppressor, and if you're of the other races, then you're oppressed. It doesn't matter what you as an individual do. It's just you're a member of this group that is oppressor or oppressed. And you could break that down on everything. It could be race, gender, sexual preference, ability, intelligence, height, weight, attractiveness, wealth. Literally every single thing. You just break up. You're not a person that's an individual. You're just a collection of these groups. And so you were praised or punished based not on your individual deeds, but based on the groups you belong to. And so you end up with all these weird contradictions where you have, like, gay rights groups on the side of violent Islamic regimes that throw gay people off buildings and things like that. Again, I'm not saying every Muslim supports that, but I'm saying these regimes do, and you end up with this because they're both oppressed, so you end up with that. So one of the things I think is funny, that you have a lot of this intersectionality that goes into, like, police brutality and conversations like that. So, for example, feminists want to talk about, minorities that are unfairly targeted by the police, which is fine. It's worth having a discussion, don't get me wrong. And just because you're a feminist doesn't mean you shouldn't. I'm not saying you shouldn't take issue with that. You should. We should all want equal justice for everyone. That's a noble pursuit. But what I find funny is it's like, okay, so they'll talk about Kaepernick or something like that. And you're like, on what scale are we using that, people that are non-white are oppressed. And one of the first things they'll say is like, well, the criminal justice system. Okay. So, because the truth is, by the way, and I'm sure if you think it through, you can understand this. First off, what group you shouldn't be praised or opposed based on your group, period. That's stupid. You shouldn't care about your group. You should be an individual. Secondly, once you take this idea of you're just a series of groups, once you realize there's an infinite number of groups, you ultimately come to the conclusion that the answer to intersectionality, the ultimate end game, is the individual, because there will never be an individual that is exactly in all the groups that you are. So that's where I'm at anyways. We should judge you based on individuality, not on these groups. So that's the second thing. But the third thing is these groups in general, if we're not looking at the individual, are all almost always oppressors and oppressed. There has never been any one of these groups, like take men versus women. It's not as simple as men are always oppressors, women are always oppressed. It's both have been oppressors, both have been oppressed, both have worked together. Same with race. It's not that white people are evil and other colors are great. Or it's not that Christians are evil and other, like, Christians have been good, Christians have done bad things, Muslims have done good things, Muslims have done bad, etc. Right? Everyone's oppressed, and as an individual, you yourself are an oppressor and an oppressed person simultaneously all throughout your life in different areas, you know? That's just the truth. People want to oversimplify it and try to make it out like it doesn't make sense, right? It's just a gross oversimplification, which intellectually, aggravates me, because I hate these people that, they think they have the answers to all life's problems, and it's just this love conquers all. That's the problem. It's like, dude, that's just a cliche. If you believe in something that took you 1 or 2 college classes to learn, and now you think that answers all of life's problems, you're probably wrong. Because life's complicated and nuanced. It's not super oversimplified. And so if you believe in this cultural Marxist approach where it's just like, there is no truth, everything's a power game, bam, that answers everything. That's ridiculous. No, it doesn't. That's bad for a host of reasons. But anyways, back to this intersectionality argument. So with the feminists, they'll be like, okay, criminal justice system and, people of color. Okay. And so the argument basically is, if you take a look at statistics, you see that on almost all levels, that whether it be likelihood to be arrested or charged with a crime, likelihood to then be convicted, the sentence that you get for that conviction, the condition of the facility you're sent to, all of those seem to be harsher with people of color than with white people. And I think there could be some, there could be room for, racial prejudice, or even if racial unconscious bias or things like that. I'm willing to hear it out. I don't know that I necessarily believe that's the major role in it, but I would say I should be also able to cite other factors a lot of that has to do with income levels, I think, more than skin color, and poorer people tend to get the shorter end of the stick, or the communities that people live in, right? So it's not the skin color, it's that community where the hammer's being brought down on police because there's a lot of crime going down, things like that. But regardless, let's take them at face value. They say the difference between white people and people of color is the people of color get treated, I'm just pulling a number out, but let's say 10% worse on all of these levels. And the statistics back that up. And they take those statistics to prove that there's some kind of racial prejudice, and therefore there's corruption going on. So the answer, one of the questions I have, particularly to feminists in that, is okay, let's say that's true. On every single barometer that you just issued, the amount of discrepancy is greater between men and women than between whites and people of color. So what I mean by that is, let's just take a number. If it's on average, a person of color is more likely to get a 10% longer jail sentence for the same crime as a white person. When you look at the studies, it's actually a man compared to a woman's more likely to get 40% more time than a woman for committing the same crime. And it's literally across every level. More likely to be arrested, more likely to be convicted, more likely to have a longer sentence, more likely to go to a facility that's way worse and way more dangerous. On every level, the difference between how men are treated harsher than women is worse than how people of color are treated to white. So then it's okay, so then if you're really concerned about people with color, because the discrepancy there, as opposed to how they're treating with whites, then you would have these feminist screaming at the top of their lungs of how corrupt the system is towards favoring women against men, because men go through all these abuses. Yet the feminists gloss over that. They'll say, well, men commit more crime. And it's no, wait a minute. If I say that same argument about people of color, you would call me a racist. But somehow you can make that argument, and that doesn't make you a misandrist. It's a ridiculous double standard. Are we allowed to use these statistics or not? And what you see is it comes down to my side. I'm very consistent. You're allowed to talk about it. I agree. Men do tend to commit more crime. On the extremes, it turns out that men do tend to have, at the extreme levels, more antisocial behavior, which leads to things like crimes being committed. So you would guess, based on the biological differences in this case, and all sorts of other things, cultural differences, things like that, that you would expect to see more men in jail. Now, it's not biological with the race that I'm looking at, but there's all signs of like societal and cultural impacts that like you would see due to things like poverty, things like that you would, in other words, it's very nuanced, right? You should be able to have these discussions without it just the book being shut and being declared a racist or sexist or anything. And the feminists are right to say like, whoa. You can't just take the statistics that show that more men are jailed and, you know, everything's worse with them. You can't just take those statistics in a vacuum. We need to look at the whole picture. Yes, exactly right. You get it. That's right. Now we should do the same with, you know, ethnicity. But it's always selectively applied that way. So I've yet to hear anyone, I've yet to hear a feminist, like, I bring this up to people all the time that talk about criminal justice and the abuse and the bias, and I'm like, what about the bias towards, in favor of women against men? That's the biggest bias we see. Crickets, no comment, you know. Are we going to, men lives matter? Are we going to have that? Because that discrepancy with Black Lives Matter was about unarmed black people being shot. Well, far more unarmed men are shot than unarmed women. So wouldn't that be an even greater cause? Where's the marches? Where's the rallies? Oh, we don't see that. And it's because it's not, right? The facts, the people pretend to be all about like the actual facts, but in reality they have a narrative and they're shifting things. And I do the same. We're all biased. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying like we need to have some standards when it comes to using evidence. And I got on this tirade because I was talking about illegal immigration, because you talk with people and they're like, oh, you know, illegals commit less crimes. It's like, well, wait a minute. We should have a nuanced discussion. First, those statistics, it's impossible to know that. You don't even know how many illegals are here, so you can't get a proportion. You know what I mean? Let's say 100 people live in my town, and they're all native citizens, and one of them commits a crime. That's 1% of the people who are criminals. Now, let's say we have 100 illegals in the entire country, and one commits a crime. Well, that's 1%. But what if that number is actually there's 500 illegals? Oh, well, now that's far less than 1%. Or what if there's only 10 illegals? Well, now it's 10%. You can't know the proportion of how much a certain section commits crimes unless you know how many there are in total of that group. And so those statistics are ridiculous, and there's been way better statistics done that show. But then the other argument you get, so sorry for that little tangent that I went off on there, but the other argument you get that's kind of like this illegals are better than native people would be, well, they do jobs that the native population are unwilling to do. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I don't buy that. Like, there's reasons for that, too. It's because employers aren't paying what people assume would be a fair wage for those jobs. So they're unwilling to do it because they also have a social safety net. If they were starving, they would do those jobs. But they don't because we have a social safety net. And basically, when you're making that argument, right, there's this paradoxical argument people make. And you see this a lot of times. And again, I've done the same. And like, I welcome when people call out when I'm making conflicting arguments. Because sometimes it's hard to see. When you're in the forest, it's hard to, it's hard to see. Like, you're just staring at the tree in front of you. You don't get the big picture. And so, like, here's arguments you would hear for illegal immigration that, like, contradict each other. The first would be, like, look, man, they're willing to do these jobs at, like, cheap labor. Like, morally, we should let them in because they're doing these jobs. And think of what would happen if you didn't have all these illegal immigrants. The price of your fruit, of, like, your home care service and stuff would go through the roof. Just take fruit, for example. All of a sudden, it's going to triple, quadruple in price. So that's the morally we should allow them in, and they help the economy by working at these, like, incredibly low wages. And it's like, oh, so basically you just made your economy argument's basically an argument for slavery. Or at least it's going towards that. It's an argument for basically having a better life, having cheaper products off the sweat and the hard labor of people being paid an unfair small wage, right? We want illegals because we set up a system where we have a minimum wage and we don't have to pay them that minimum wage, so they could pick our fruit cheap and then we could all have cheap fruit. Isn't that a great thing? Well, no. Why should those illegals suffer for that? And then they'll go, oh, yeah, you're right. Actually, What we should do is make sure that all these illegals are actually being paid an appropriate wage. They should have all the protections of a regular citizen. Okay, then fruit's going to quadruple in price. Isn't that what you just told me? If we kicked them out and you had to pay an American that wage, then the price of fruit would go through the roof. So then if you're saying, well, wait a minute, we should pay these illegals the wage that an American would be willing to do the job for. Okay, well, then that takes out your moral argument and the fact that, Americans are unwilling to do this jobs. It's contradictory. You can't have it both ways. So, yeah, I don't buy the moral argument. I think the moral argument's garbage. Same with healthcare, right? The healthcare argument went the same way. When Obamacare was coming out, it was, on one hand, it's the moral thing to do. We have to give everyone health care. On the other hand, look, it'll save people money that have insurance right now, because what happens is so many people go and use these healthcare services and never pay for them. Okay, those arguments contradict. If people were getting the services and not paying, then it proves that your argument that all these poor people are lined up dying because they can't get health care is garbage. So the economic argument almost always contradicts the moral argument. And I tend to believe that a lot of times either it's not thought through, or if it is thought through, then the reason that they're contradicting is because in reality, the economic argument's what matters to people. People basically are advocating positions that personally benefit them, and they're couching it in the idea of like, oh, but, it's the moral thing to do. That's why, you see slip-ups all the time from people in Hollywood. They're like, oh, Trump's like against illegals. Like, then, who would raise our kids? Who would mow our lawns? It's like, exactly. You don't even see how condescending you are. You want these people because it's a benefit to you. You want them to have low wages and be a strata below you so you could be, the baron or the upper class living on the backs of these people in the lower class. Like, that's what they want, these celebrities. Again, I'm not saying that with everyone. There are people that legitimately have moral concerns about illegal immigration, but that's just, that's something you see. And, so anyways, when I was getting on this illegal immigration talk, I was talking about how, when you're trying to couch the argument in an emotional appeal, this particular person I'm talking to makes those two arguments like, oh, they do jobs Americans won't, and, they actually commit less crime than native population, citizens. You can't, I can make all the arguments I want about, like, look, they're competing with, low-skilled labor in this country, which actually lowers wages for, the same population, or lowers wages and things like that, because a lot of times that argument won't hit home because there are groups of people that they care about. So you have to couch it in terms of like, yes, but some of the same populations you're concerned about, like for example, legal Hispanic community or African American community, those are the communities that are actually in most direct competition with illegal immigration when it comes to jobs. Sure, you're right, the wealthy people in Silicon Valley aren't competing, so they don't care, right? But the people that actually compete care, and it drives down the cost of labor. That's not because the illegal immigrant's a terrible person. It has nothing to do with that. It's just more labor equals less wage paid for the labor. It's that simple. I hope this is still right. Oh, okay. And so that's not a comment. It's just a reason. It's like, well, look. And then, what I said to this person was, because they're like, their entire comment was, it's a myth. There is no illegal immigration crisis. It's all a myth. It's a myth. And so I was like, I don't think it's a myth. For example, here's something that's not a myth. The numbers show that something like 80% of women that try to come over illegally are actually sexually assaulted in some way, whether it be by coyotes that are supposedly paying, they're paying to try to get over here, or other people that are in these caravans. There are children that go missing. There are people that are killed. There are all kinds of like terrible things that happen because there are people exploiting these people all the way. Like, let's assume all these people are good. The caravan coming from Honduras. There are people trying to get money based off their exploitation the entire trip. And it's very, it's a trying trip. It's a very terrible thing. And I choose to think that it is a crisis, that we have a system that is encouraging people to try to make that journey. We have people in this country encouraging that know full well they're probably not going to get in. And so all that pain and abuse that they suffered the whole way, maybe, sexually assaulted, maybe a loved one killed, maybe, all kinds of terrible stuff that could happen. And no fault of the U.S. government, by the way. This is just all the trip, But there are people in this country encouraging that, knowing they won't get in, knowing they'll go through that abuse. And so we see that abuse occurring. I think that is a crisis. I happen to think that these women being raped or the children being hurt or the men being hurt or being exploited in that way is a very bad thing. And this person laughs at me and is like, I can't believe you would use that as an argument for your side of the issue. Exactly. That's exactly the point. You can't believe that because you have to paint me as a caricature of like, I don't care about women getting raped. I don't care about poor people. No, I do, right? And I think that doesn't mean that my solution is then have open borders, let everyone in. My solution is have our borders it be so clear that like, dude, you're not getting in, that journey never happens. And so then they stay in their country and their country gets better as a result of the hardworking people that want to stay there doing better. We will never pragmatically be able to solve everything, every poor person in the world. It'll just devastate the natural resources of this country or any country that would have open borders. And it would be particularly the same people that advocate this also want big social safety nets, which would mean you want billions of people to come in and you want to give them all like, free college or free healthcare or a living wage. It's just not possible. It can't happen. That's my feelings on it. That doesn't mean I'm immoral, that I want bad things to happen, but they're literally, like, you have to count it, like, they can't fathom that it's like, oh, you might be a moral person that actually cares about these people in these caravans and still not want them to come in. They can't fathom that. So when you're like, actually, I think that your position's worse for these people in the caravan, they don't get it. They're like, oh, that's even fun. Like, you laugh because it's like, oh, it doesn't fit the narrative. How can that be? And again, I say this a lot, but that's one of the things that's one of my big criticisms of the Republican Party. I think that they do a terrible job of reaching out to different demographics. The Republican Party's idea is like, oh, we hope that, we hope there's low turnout amongst young people. We hope there's low turnout amongst women. We hope there's low turnout amongst, communities of color. No, I disagree. I think that my policies and ideas are better for those communities. That's what I think. Now, you might disagree, and maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong even. But I'm not coming from it from an immoral place. Like, I want to see these people suffer. No, that's not it at all. I want them the very best for them as well, especially because to me, they're all U.S. citizens. As someone who would be running for office, I'm representing them as much as anyone else. And so, I'm going to advocate for policies I think can help everyone. I choose to think the best way to do that is to forego like this kind of this kind of group-based approach where we try to splinter everyone in as white people vote this way, Hispanics vote this, men this way, women this way. And I just advocate dealing with people and individuals and not pandering to group identity. But I think that's best for all those groups as well. That in the end it will work out better. So that's my thoughts on that. So real quick then, I don't know how much longer I'm going to go here, but on the wall, and the shutdown, I guess we'll just talk about the shutdown. With the shutdown, very similarly to what I started off saying about immigration is like, if you really step back, I think it's so funny to watch people argue, like, whose fault is the shutdown? Like, is it Trump's fault? Because he basically was like, look, I'm not going to sign anything unless there's funding for the wall. Or is it the Democrats' fault because they knew that and they won't give him funding for the wall? And so, which side is at fault? Surely, no matter who you're a fan of, which side you defend more, you can understand that both sides are at fault, right? The shutdown can only happen if they can't come to an agreement. And so you might say, well, I think this side's more reasonable, whichever side that may be. But still, they're both at fault. Like, it's that simple. And so it's funny to watch people be like, no, this is all Trump's fault. Nope, it's all Schumer's fault. It's like, well, clearly they both had to have input in this. And so they're both at fault. Because either one of them, Trump could wake up tomorrow and say, okay, no more funding for the wall necessary. And so you could say, see, he could give up and the budget would be passed, and that proves that it's Trump's fault. But in the same token, Schumer could wake up and say, all right, we're going to give $5 billion for the wall. And then, again, it's done. So clearly both sides are at fault. Both sides think they're right in doing what they're doing, but I just think it's funny watching people go off. Now, I believe that the establishment and the Republican and Democrat are both basically the same party, the people in the real positions of power. And I don't think that they want to solve illegal immigration. I think the objections to the wall are primarily a fear that it will work, is my feeling on it. And there are only two reasons I've heard against the wall that they won't give funding. The first is that it's racist, and that's laughable and almost not worth discussing because people like Pelosi say that. But they were for funding a border fence. So I don't quite get why a fence is not racist, but a wall is racist. Doesn't much make sense to me. And it's stupid. It's not racist. Just like the door on my apartment isn't racist to kind of keep my property sealed off. It's stupid. There's people like Pelosi that make these arguments live in gated communities with a bunch of wealthy people that basically look like them. So I'll take what they say about how it's racist for us to have secure borders with a grain of salt. And then the other argument, which is the far more compelling argument, because that argument's just dumb, is it's a waste of money. It won't work and it's a waste of money. Okay, I'm willing to hear those arguments out, right? But I don't think anyone's definitively proved it won't work. I think anyone, if they're really honest, would say it will work somewhat. The question is the amount that it'll work worth the money that you would spend on it? So maybe if, clearly it will stop at least someone from coming over. The question is how many. So if it would stop 90%, clearly that seems worth it. But if it only stops 5%, then is it worth it? That's the questions we should be having. That's the discussion, I think. But instead, it's just like asserted, no, it won't work, and it costs a lot of money. And I'm sorry I have a tough time believing that's what people's true motivations are when they're willing to spend billions of dollars on anything over and over and over that literally have no benefit to this country. They had no problem sending $10 billion. And the same time they're arguing about $5 billion for the wall, they sent $10 billion to Central America and Mexico to basically try to appease people to not come to the United States. But they won't do $5 billion for the wall. So I'm sorry, I don't believe it. And we're talking about, and it's both sides, by the way. It's one of my big criticisms with the Republican Party, right? They'll beat their chest and scream like, oh, Obama, debt spending. Look at how much money he's spending. Yet they can't wait when they're in charge to have deficit spending. Worse, Trump's doing it worse than Obama did at this tenure in his presidency. And everyone always justifies it when they're doing, but my deficit spending is a good thing because it'll boost the economy so much that inevitably we won't have to spend deficit because the economy will be so much better. That's what every president says. So I find it incredibly hypocritical for Republicans to call out when the Democrats do it and then vote for this over and over again when they're in office. No, sorry. It's bad when the other people do it. It's bad when the people I vote for do it. Period. Again, I guess that's more in line of I'm not cheering for a team or a party. I'm cheering for an idea, a policy, So if the party I voted for goes against that policy, I have no trouble saying, yeah, that it was bad that they did this. So I don't think that it's budgetary concerns. I don't think that $5 billion is like breaking the bank in a world where billions upon billions upon billions of dollars are giving for pork projects that do absolutely nothing. Where contract lobbyists are making money hand over foot on defense contracts and things that never result in making this country any safer or helping any troops. And that's just one area, defense spending. That happens all over the place. How much money was given to Solyndra by Obama for green energy? What? $500 million that just ended up going into some people's pockets? Yeah, great, right? But $5 billion for the wall. To me, I think that is a fear that it will work. They don't want that because the establishment Republicans like the cheap labor. Their lobbyist friends that pay for them to get into office, the big spenders, they want cheap labor, and so they want the illegals to come in. And the establishment left wants the illegals because they think it'll be potential votes for them in the future, or they want some kind of demographic change or something like that. But both sides, that's why, how else can you explain nothing's been done about it? For years. Reagan was talking about this. Bill Clinton. Both Bushes. Every 4 years, every election time we hear, illegals will do something this time, then nothing gets done. Well, at some point you have to say, well, there's clearly not a will for it to get done for a reason, because people don't really mind it, the people that are making the policies. And that's the truth. And that's why, and then the Democrats I find more egregious. Well, in some sense I find the Republicans more egregious because to me, I'm in favor of the wall, right? But to me, the number one thing you can do is start criminally charging these companies that are knowingly hiring illegals. Watch how quick that ends the flow of things. But no one wants to talk about that. You don't want to criminally go after the person that's giving you money for your campaign if you're a Republican or Democrat. Most of these companies give to both sides so that they'll turn a blind eye because it's profitable. That's what they want. But the Democrats are egregious in a different way where they constantly pretend as well that oh yeah, border security. We want border security, border security. But then they vote against everything that would potentially be border security. Over and over. What are they suggesting? What have they done? Both sides. Trump had the House and the Senate and was the president. Didn't do anything. Obama had the Democrat House and Senate. Didn't do anything. So it's not just gridlock is the excuse. They don't want it done. And like Trump, I think, truly does want it done. But again, the establishment people in his party, they don't want it done. Just like the Republicans lied, oh, we're going to repeal Obamacare, repeal Obamacare. Okay, then no excuses. You had the House and the Senate, and you had a president willing to sign off on that, and you couldn't come to an agreement. So that's one thing you got to give the Democrats credit for. They're way better of acting cohesively. Like, they basically operate in one mind. There's not many people peeling off from the group. The Republicans, they have all sorts of people that'll, well, I have this difference, I have that difference. Someone like Rand Paul, who I think's great. And so, yeah, that's my take on that. And then as far as the shutdown and whole goes, I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry if you are an employee that's relying on that money, but I think you'll get your money back. Eventually it'll be signed. So you might go through a couple of hard weeks or months, but it'll work out at the end. But I think our government's so huge that one of the things is when the government shuts down, the average person's like, okay, nothing's really changed for me. So it just goes to show, like, geez, maybe this government's bloated beyond what it's needed in general. So why don't we work on shrinking it some? Yes, that's a great idea. I agree. We should do that. What I would like to see is someone to come up with a calculator, right, where it's like every day that the government shut down, how much money was saved based how much would have been spent. Let's get that figure. Let's see what that number. I think it would be interesting to see how much are we actually saving. Would that put in effect? How soon could we end the national debt if we eliminated some of these programs? That would give you a good idea of it, I think. So, and then to me, it's I was just kind of joking, like, there's certain things that happen in life that you feel like you can get away with anything, like being in Pittsburgh, around the Pittsburgh area. I live in a rural area outside of Pittsburgh. Like, when the Steelers win the Super Bowl, you feel like you could do anything, and if the cop arrests you, you're just like, Super Bowl! And they're like, yeah, okay. And the day we got bin Laden, right? Like, it's the same thing. You get caught with public urination or something. The cop's like, hey, what are you doing? And you're just like, we got him. And they're going to be like, yeah, we got him. You're right. And so, like, that was my joke with the shutdown. So I told my wife, I was like, well, I no longer have to wear pants. Public indecency doesn't apply. There's no government. A car alarm went off outside our house. I was like, it's the purge. Anarchy's running amok. And in reality, it's just a joke. It's like, nothing really changed. Nothing changed for me. That's the ugly truth anyways about politics in general that no one wants to admit. All the fear-mongering, whether it be Obama or Trump, right? Oh my God, once Trump got elected, as soon as he takes office, my world's going to be shattered. We'll talk to those people 2 years later. It's like, well, what happened? Well, basically I have the same job. I got a little bit of a raise. Nothing really. For the vast majority of people, nothing really changes. But we play the game, and I'm as guilty as anyone. I'm sitting here talking. There's issues that I think are very important. But if I'm totally honest, had Hillary been elected, my life would probably be very, very, very similar to what it is right now had Trump been elected. I'd probably have more fun because I'd have more ridiculous stuff I could complain about every day. But I do a great job of finding things to complain about. So, yeah, the last subject I'll talk about real quick. Now, take this one with a grain of salt because I've only seen this reported a couple places. And it has to do with Merkel, who's the Chancellor of Germany. It's tough because I don't speak German, but anytime you get like a claim that a foreign leader said something, it's hard because you don't know if it's being translated correctly or if a news source is, being unfair or something like that. So take this with a grain of salt. But I want to read what I read that she supposedly said today. She said, according to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who told an audience in Berlin that, she said, nation-states must be prepared to give up their sovereignty. And they must not listen to the will of their citizen when it comes to questions of immigration, borders, or even sovereignty. Now, she goes on to explain what that means. But, like, this is, I think you're starting to see a more open push for the open borders, globalism agenda. Like, it's starting to become, it's like with socialism in the United States, right? Like, it used to be a dirty word. And you'd be like, hey, I think that policy's kind of like leading towards socialism. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. And now it's just an outright like, yeah, it is. Socialism's good. That's how far we've come in like 10 years. It's the same here where it was like, oh, no. We're not saying erode national sovereignty. We're just saying that we need better cohesion with like the international community. Now, granted, again, I'm not saying Merkel's saying this at the behest of the United States or anything, but that's what you hear in general when it comes to like the idea of nationalism versus globalism. No. We're in favor of nation states. We just think that, we should have these international governing bodies as well. And now it seems to be getting more and more close to like nationalism's bad. the nation state's the root of all problems. We need to just forget about national sovereignty. We need to have total open borders, free flow of people, more of a global government, and you're starting to see it's heading that direction. And the funny part is, for those of you who know me from like Above Top Secret, this was the ultimate conspiracy that, I remember back in 2003, 2004 talking about this, the idea of like a new world order, a global government that controls everything. And the conspiracy, if I remember, was kind of like it'll eventually break into like 3 unions. You'd have the European Union, because that was kind of getting figured out back then. And then you would have like the Asian Union and the American Union. And those 3 unions. And then from there, it would consolidate into one kind of global power. That was the idea. And this was really bad because the conspiratorial would say, like, this will lead to basically some oligarchs that would... Yeah, I know. This is some Alex Jones. I used to listen to Alex Jones, right? I still find him highly entertaining. But that was kind of the theory. Then you would have these oligarchs that would basically roll over us all. And the more decentralized or the more centralized the government gets, the further away it gets from the individual people. And so your opinion doesn't matter. And so we see that playing out in an extent... Not in as like Alex Jones, the vampiric aliens are sucking the souls of the children type stuff. Like, I'm not saying that. But you do start to see, like, what's one of the complaints you hear for Brexit? Why people wanted Brexit? Well, because they don't get to vote in Brussels, the average person. Yet all these laws are being made in Brussels that affects the average person living in the UK that they had no say in. That was the fear. That's what no taxation without representation was about. The American Revolution. It's like, no, we're willing to pay taxes and to do stuff as long as we get a voice. We get kind of a vote into what's going on. But we're not going to pay some system where we have no voice, where it just lords over us. We pay them money, and we have to follow their laws, and we have no say in it, right? So that's what globalism is going to lead to. But that was the conspiracy, right? And we're starting to see some of it play out. And now it's just like, I remember, there used to be I forget what my old name was on ATS, but there would be like threads where people would be like, hey man, I was watching the news and someone said New World Order. Whoa, how nefarious is that? And not talking about Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and the wrestling NWO. But I digress. Anyways, it was, and it was like, oh, no, they didn't mean it that way. Now they're just like, the word's not New World Order now, it's globalism. But the implication, they're just upfront with it. Merkel's like, yeah, national sovereignty, not a good thing. We know best. The people being upset about uncontrolled immigration don't know what's good for them. We'll take care of it. We don't care how they vote. We don't care what their voice is. And isn't this the joke with Brexit anyways? Watch all these like anti-Brexit people that are like, well, we need a new referendum. That's the problem. So here's what happened predictably. You put a bunch of people, and again, I'm a novice when it comes to Brexit. I don't live there. I'm sure people know more than me and follow it more than me. But here's an outsider's perspective on it. You had the people vote. It seemed like the entire media mouthpiece, the establishment in the UK and even all of Europe, even in the United States with people like Obama, was like, yes, you got to stay in the EU. I feel like that's why the vote came up in the first place, because they felt like all the chips were in their corner so much. Hey, give the people their stupid vote. We control, like, basically all the flow of information, so they'll end up voting our way, and then they can shut up, and that's just the way it's going to be. Well, unbeknownst to them, the vote didn't go their way, right? Oops! Despite all the propaganda, all the fear-mongering of, if we leave, this is all the horrible stuff that will happen. So then what's option 2? Well, then we got to make sure the people that are in charge of Brexit are people that didn't want it in the first place, like Theresa May. And then be dismayed when they can't come to an agreement exactly how to leave. Now tell me this, if the EU is such a good thing, and it's so good for the people of the UK, why are they fighting tooth and nail to screw over the UK as much as possible if they leave the EU? They could still have free market access. I mean, basically the argument was we could still have open markets, we just don't want free flow of people, and we don't want to be beholden to a lot of the laws you're beholden to. But we still want free trade. But no, the EU's like, no. Almost like they're saying, like, pettily, you're either with us or you're against us. If you're against us, then we want you to suffer. Boy, that sounds like a group that you want to be a part of, doesn't it? So anyways, the deal doesn't happen. So what do the people say? Oh, we need a new referendum. No, there's precedent for this, right? Remember there was, I think it was called the Libson Treaty in Ireland, which had to do with something that the EU wanted. And so they have the vote in Ireland, and the vote doesn't go their way. So what do? 6 months later, have another vote until it goes their way. That's what the globalists are for. The globalists are for democracy as long as it agrees with them. But when it doesn't, then you get the Merkel speech. Well, screw the sovereignty of the people. They don't know what's best for them. Shut up. National sovereignty's stupid. Doesn't matter how they vote. Globalism. And we'll just keep holding votes until the votes go our way. And we'll purposely tighten the screws on people and make their lives harder until they say what we want. That's what we're talking about. That's what the globalist mindset is. It's very similar to the business, like a lot of the business mindset in the United States, where it's like these banks, right? The banks, they make all these illegal or risky bets, giving mortgages to people they know will never pay back, lying about the ratings on these mortgages, packaging them, and when they win, when the gamble pays off and they get all this money, they're shooting dice and it works. Bam, that's their money. They're collecting that money. But then eventually what happens when you gamble like that? Eventually you lose. So did they lose their money? No. They make the taxpayer bail them out. So it's capitalized gains and socialized losses. Well, that's the globalists, right? The globalists are democracy when it's in favor of us, no democracy when it votes against us. Isn't it nice how that works? And people with a straight face are advocating, we need another referendum. Okay, let's say there's another Brexit referendum, and this time it votes to stay. Well, 3 years later, can we have another referendum to see if we want to leave then? I mean, it's absolutely absurd. How about you leave, and then let's see how that's looking in like 5-10 years, and then maybe if you want to vote to stay. Again, I'm not a citizen of the UK, so my opinion shouldn't matter, but I'm just trying to look at this from an outsider's point of view. And when you see people like Merkel talk, like like you see what they're saying. They're saying it without saying it. Look at Macron, right? In France. Oh, he was the, Rothschild banker, it was a revolution, a centrist revolution. No extreme right, no extreme left. We don't want populism, international community, right? Yeah, look how that's working. Because what that really means is screw my people, screw the working class in my country. That's what globalism is. The conspiracy, the Alex Jones type conspiracy that I actually kind of believe is that all these, a more powerful government, what they really want is to make people more dependent on the government. Now, it could be they could have altruistic reasons for it. They could say, we truly think that people are incapable of living without government control, so we need to have as much power and as influence over them as possible to ensure that they live what we consider to be productive lives. I happen to be on the other end of the scale, which I believe in liberty and personal freedom. That's what makes life worth living, to me. And yeah, that also means that you're more apt to make mistakes or do something that will harm you. Liberty means you're free to smoke the cigarette, but when it kills you, don't complain. The opposite end of that spectrum is the government saying, don't you touch that cigarette, and let me give you a list of what you're allowed to consume and not allowed to consume. I would rather live in the life where I can make my own poor decisions. But the globalism is just the ultimate manifestation of that, where you have this huge government, and they want people to become totally dependent on them. So they don't want a middle class. You're either part of that elite, or you're part of the dependent class. That's the two classes they want, and we see this because every place that advocates these policies that we can see, it starts to go more stratified to that. For example, let's look at California in the United States, right? It has the wealthiest people in the country and the poorest people in the country. It's literally like a fiefdom. Like you have the peasants living all around these beautiful castles of Silicon Valley. People living on the streets. You can't afford to rent a home without making $150,000 a year. Living in vehicles, living in encampments, people defecating on the streets, drug needles on the streets. How can that be? We're told that all these, the Zuckerbergs of the world and all these people in Silicon Valley that are constantly berating us about how moral they are and about how we need to allow all these illegals in and stuff. They walk 2 blocks from their house and see this insane poverty. What are they doing? How much more money do you need, Zuckerberg? How much more control do you need? Bezos, all these people. But they see this poverty and it's just like, meh. Now we want everyone else to pay more. We want big government. Government that, by the way, we could then lobby and have do what we want with our billions of dollars. That's what they want. They don't want a personal responsibility to do something. And so we see this all over the place, that it's always the working class, right? That's the class that gets screwed constantly. That's why, the Democrats now are the party of extremely wealthy and the poor. That's who the Democrats are. The middle class ends up tending to vote Republican. Not to say the Republican always has their interests at heart. Again, if you see my videos, one of my big complaints is, who the heck's out there speaking for the working class? Trump trying. And regardless if he succeeds or not, that probably went a long way to him winning. He was actually talking to people. Now, again, we could disagree. You might think that NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have helped the working class in this country. You might think that that's reasonable. You could have a debate in that. But at least Trump was saying, I'm against this because the worker, because I think it'll hurt the worker, as opposed to what was the Democrats. Obama was pushing it, Hillary pushed it, and then didn't when she realized that like the unions were against it. So she was just kind of like, women, I'm a woman. Remember, I'm a woman. Vote for me, I'm a woman. Didn't bother to go to all these states with like blue collar people working. Didn't care. They don't care. Unions who had been voting Democrat, people that were in unions for years and years and years, started supporting Donald Trump. How do you explain that? Unions supporting an independently wealthy billionaire? It seems nonsensical, but it's because working class people are thirsty for representation, not just in this country, all over the world. You know, you get tired of being told you're the piece of crap. Climate change, it's you. You need to change. Your gas prices need to go up. The light bulbs you use are bad. Your vehicle doesn't get good enough standards. We'll still fly our private jets, right? You're the problem. Your life, you need to diminish your quality of life. Immigration, yeah, you need to accept all these, more immigrants need to come in. You need to accept competition for labor. You need to have more illegals. You need to have advocating for more legal immigration. They need to come into your town, you know, like you see particularly in the EU, you see this a lot where it's like towns are being influxed. They literally don't have the infrastructure to handle, like town of 800 people gets 2,500 refugees sent in and things like that. They don't have the infrastructure to handle it. Tough luck, you deal with it, you know. Meanwhile, we're in our gated communities. It doesn't affect us. It's every issue like that. The people in Brussels are in their high tower in the EU. They don't care what their policies affect some local fishermen in the UK. They don't care. They don't care at all. That bureaucracy, and we know that, you know, not only do you know that bureaucracies are corrupt, which is where the old phrase, you know, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? That's what we're talking about. That's why I'm for smaller government. But we also know that they're, in addition to, even if you don't buy the corrupt argument, which I think I could convince you they are corrupt, they're inept, certainly. The more bureaucracy you have, that's why your township, you know, you're more willing, your township's going to be able to deal with the problems of the township much faster than the federal government coming in and doing it will, because it just has to go through so much bureaucracy. And yeah. That's what ends up happening. And it's striking to me to just see. Now again, perhaps it'll come out that this quote that I read will be a misquote from Chancellor Merkel. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is true. That she's just like, the heck with national sovereignty. And, you know, and I see, you know, one of my big complaints is, look, I hate globalism. I think it's a really bad thing, right? But I could respect, and same with socialism or communism, right? But I'm willing to hear you out. I don't think you're a crappy person necessarily for advocating it. You know, you might have your reasons. I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. I think you're wrong, but let's hash it out. And certainly, I think I'm not such an extreme capitalist that I'm like no intervention whatsoever. Because if I believe that, I would believe in no taxes, which I don't. And I do believe we need to have a social safety net, and we need to have a military, things like that. So I'm not that extreme. So clearly, I'm willing to hear out arguments. I understand that it's not clear, clear, unfettered, no government. It's not anarchist versus total government control and pick one or the other. I'm clearly somewhere in the middle, so I'm willing to hear you out. You might be able to budge me this way or that way, you know. That's a good thing. But one of my big pet peeves is people just unwilling to tell the truth. Just tell the truth. Like, and I understand the political gamesmanship of it. If you believe something and that you think that it politically won't be popular, then you kind of keep it to yourself. And I think it was you saw this with like McCaskill, with some of these Project Veritas videos where she's running and like, you know, they're filming in just kind of her, you know, gatherings, like her conventions where they're like, yeah, actually, you know, she's actually way more extreme on like gun control policies and all these other policies. But don't tell people that because, you know, if people heard that, they wouldn't vote for her. Well, I'm of the exact opposite. It's like, here's what I think, and if you disagree with me, in fact, you may be right if you disagree with me, but don't vote for me. No hard feelings. And let that person with the best idea that the people think like the most, let that person win. That seems a perfectly reasonable system to me. I'm not going to lie and be like, you know, oh, actually, I'm for marijuana legalization, but I'm afraid in this. And I'll tell you straight up, in the district I'm running in, probably not the most popular thing is a Republican to be for legalization of marijuana. Probably not. I don't care. That's what I believe. If you don't like me, vote for the other guy. No hard feelings. I think you're wrong, but that's what I feel. I'm not going to be like, well, I keep that under wraps. Like the people that know me, shh, don't say that stuff. You know, I don't want that to get out that I'm actually for that. Like, it's so aggravating. Just be honest. You see this with the gun control debate all the time. Just say it. Tell me what guns should be allowed, period. Let's just get to the end. That's it. Don't be like, him and, oh, no, I'm not talking about that. It's just bump stocks. And then once you get bump stocks, it's like, oh, well, now this. It's like, just tell me. Just, the same with immigration. I'm immoral. If I have a problem with, illegal immigration, it's like, okay, let's just give me the number then. How many should we take in? How many? It doesn't have to be within, 100 people. You could be within 10 million people, 50 million people. Just give me a ballpark figure and an idea of what you're talking about. Instead of trying to have it both ways. Oh, no, I'm not saying open borders. I'm saying allow this group in. And then the next group allow them in. And then the next group. And then the next group. And this group should be given citizenship. And it's like, just tell me the end game. Lay it out there. And it's like, like with the whole Russia collusion thing. Let's just get it out there in black and white. Tell me what is against the law. Explain, because there is no law that says you can't collude, right? So what is it that is immoral or illegal in your mind, right? And I actually had this happen with someone I consider reasonably intelligent. Tell me what the problem is. What is the investigation? What is the possible crime? And I was told by this person that Trump's campaign having connections to so many Russians and trying to get dirt from Russians against Hillary was reason for the investigation and probably a crime. And so you're like, okay, so that's it. That's the criteria. Having connections to Russians and trying to get dirt against your opponent's a crime. Yep. Okay. Hillary did the same thing. Why no investigation to her? Oh, no. Her connections were different. And the type of dirt she was getting was different. And it's like, this is why you can't have, it's like, I don't care. I'm willing. We might disagree on what your definition is. I'm just asking to just lay it out there, right? This is what was immoral. This is what was the crime. And now we could debate whether or not that's a good definition and whether or not who broke that. But it should be applied equally, right? Just get it out there. Stop being dishonest and changing definitions and being unwilling to say what you think's the truth because you're trying to win an argument or you're trying to get your side in power, It's deleting evidence bad. Yes, it's bad. Okay, if Trump deletes evidence, that's how I feel, right? If Trump and his team gets evidence subpoenaed from Mueller, and they destroy that evidence after it's subpoenaed, I will be the first person saying that is corrupt. They should be charged for this. And in fact, there should probably be impeachment hearings for this. Someone ought to go down for that because our legal system said that is a very serious crime. They're investigating crimes, and for them to subpoena evidence and you to willingly destroy it, that's a serious crime. But I have people, and I know that tons of Trump haters would be like, almost all of them would be like, yes, that's it, get him, take him down, that's it. That proves obstruction, that proves he's not fit for the office, he should be impeached, he should be held criminally accountable. And I would be like, yeah, you're basically right. But then when Hillary's team does the exact same thing, they're like, I don't think it's a big deal. And I'm not naive. There are people on the other end that screamed about Hillary with me about how bad that was. And if Trump would do it, they'd be like, well, turnabout's fair play. No, that's corrupt too. And it's so frustrating. You look at these people, it's like, why are you willing, why are you willing to cheer for this? Why are you willing to lie or to not just have a clear-cut stance because it benefits your team? Is it worth it? And you can't help it. It makes me think of like people that, maybe you're a burglar or something. You probably justify it to yourself, Yeah, I broke, you hear locally, you'll hear stories of maybe someone was addicted to drugs, which is sad, and, then it ends up they took a bunch of money from their grandparents or something like that. Some real crappy, scum of the earth stuff. Probably people that loved you and that trust you and that you're taking money from them, But I always think, that person probably justified it to themselves. Well, grandma sucks. She was always mean to me, and I need the money, and blah, blah, blah. And it's but you can't live your life that way. That's why the truth matters. That's why postmodernists are wrong. Because once you start bending that, right? Once you start bending your morals and your values, you always find a way to make what you think fit, right? You switch it around, and it's always... And so you could argue with a straight face. The dirt Trump tried to get from Russians, horrible, evil, criminal treason. The dirt Hillary tried to get in Russians from Trump, perfectly reasonable, honest, great thing to do. And you might be saying to yourself, wow, okay, yeah, that's messed up, but So what, a couple fringe people. No, that's the mainstream narrative on the Trump-Russia investigation. That is the overarching narrative that you will get on any media you consume. Culturally. Like what I always say, I got to come up with a word for this, but like the cultural powers in our country, right? Which is everything that affects our culture, which would be academia, and it would be Hollywood, and people produce movies and things like that, and the music industry, and athletes, and the people that control social media, and the mainstream media. That's the prevailing narrative. It's okay for Hillary to collude with Russians, or however, whatever word you want to use, to get dirt from Russians against Trump. That's okay. But for Trump's team to try to get dirt on Hillary from Russians is a horrible crime that people need to be charged with. That is the impetus for this entire investigation. That is why people are saying Trump Jr. needs to be in prison. And that's it. This isn't a fringe person. That's the prevailing narrative. It's the same narrative that you see, like, you know, Trump's a crazy, insane warmonger that's going to drive us to war with Russia, but he's a really horrible, crappy person for pulling out of Syria and saying he wants to bring troops home from Afghanistan. I read an article that said Trump is making us closer to having a nuclear war with Russia based on pulling out of Syria, because the pulling out of Syria proves that he's unstable and might have an accidental nuclear launch. And what kind of mental twisting do you have to do to say, by pulling out of an area that is Russia's ally militarily, we're making conflict with Russia, we're edging closer to it? It's absolute nonsense. It's what I started off the video talking about, like this Orwellian doublespeak. Peace is war. War is peace, you know? Pulling out, having less troops overseas, that's indicative of more terrible wars. And the media, like, you could almost comment, and you see these videos sometimes, like, where someone will go on college campus and they'll read quotes from Donald Trump and be like, what do you think of this? And they'll read a quote and people are like, what a disgusting racist, blah, 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 blah. And then afterwards, like, yeah, actually, that was Obama's State of the Union, like 4 years ago. Oh, well, yeah, I guess it's not so bad then. It's like, oh, my goodness. So, yeah, just the double standard is always right. That's all I've asked from the get-go. I mean, and that's why, you know, I feel justified in saying, you know, if Trump committed any crimes, let him be held accountable. Like, you know, that's fine. I'm not cheering for just a person, right? I'm cheering for policies, for values, for, you know, ideas. I'm for the rule of law. If he broke the law, he should be charged. I just want it to be applied to everyone. That's it. And there's so many people that are willing, you know, that are just willing to be like, nope, just apply it to Trump. Just to Trump. That's all that it should matter. Just apply it to him. So, yeah, it's very frustrating, but you see that, you know, when it comes to things, and I somehow got in that riff talking about globalization, but that's the ultimate sin, right? That's what Trump, you know, Trump's big sin is, the reason that he must be taken down is because he's anti-establishment, and the establishment's globalist. You know, Schumer told us, we live in a country, regardless what, you know, all this minutia, like this is what I tell people. It's hard. It's hard when it comes to the Russia stuff. There's so many names and there's so much, like the average person just doesn't know. The average person's just like, dude, this isn't affecting my life. I don't care. That's what the average person thinks, you know? And so if you're a Trump hater, that probably boils your blood because you're like, oh, but Russia. But it also, like, for someone like me, I'm like, no, you should care as well from the opposite angle. Because look at this crazy corruption going on. And both, they're just like, whatever, dude, my job. You know, I'm concerned about my family, my job. That's it. That's what I'm concerned with. So, you know, one of the things I do to break it down real easy is we live in a country where on national television, basically the leader of the party against our president, the other political party, went on national television and said, hey, Trump, if I was you, I wouldn't criticize the intel community because they will take you down. That's it. That's all you need to know, right? And then people say you're a conspiracy theorist if you use terms like deep state or if you say that there's possible corruption. Everything that I talk about when I talk that is just proving Chuck Schumer's assertion. That's all it is. It's not me. I say that as well. But don't take my word for it. Take Trump's biggest opponent, supposedly. He outlined it very clearly. I'm just showing you the proof. Like, yep, Schumer's right. Here's what they did again. Here's the corruption that happened here. Here's the double standard that happened here. Schumer knows how to play the game. Schumer's like, hey, I ain't going to get in their bad side. I know what'll happen. I don't want people going through my bank records. I don't want people raiding my lawyer's office in the middle of the night. How many of these establishment people in Washington do you think they wouldn't find crimes on if their lawyer's office got raided in the middle of the night? Like, if you're honest with yourself, 20% would be innocent? Maybe? That's all I want, equal application of the law, you know? But you tell people that. It's like, does it... Like, that sounds like some crazy, like, Gestapo stuff. That you basically have elected leaders, the strongest in their party, being like, hey, do not criticize these unelected bureaucrats. They will turn your life upside down. And you'd say this to people. And there are people on the left, right? There's the Glenn Greenwalds. I disagree heavily with Glenn Greenwald on a lot. But he does the online magazine, The Intercept. He's kind of famous for being the person that Snowden went to when he had all of his revelations. There's people I can't recommend enough, especially if you're left-leaning and you're watching this. Check out Jimmy Dore. He's big progressive, like a Bernie supporter. Again, I disagree with him heavily. I don't like Bernie very much. But he knows that this is garbage. And he's funny, too. Which funny forgives everything, almost, right? I'm willing, like, even if I totally disagree with someone, if they're putting it through in a funny way, I'm like, all right, man, I'd listen to this, you know. I get it. I learn a lot through comedy, so for me that's, you know, and the Doors probably kind of brought me closer to him on some positions. Not real close, but, you know, I'm willing to hear him out. He's funny, and I think he does a good job. He knows the Russia thing's garbage. He knows. There's just basic things. Like Schumer said that. The fact that we know, you know, Jimmy Dore did a whole, like, half hour, and he's, like, incredulous, like I am. Like, he can't believe, because Jimmy Dore's basically, he disliked Hillary immensely. He's calling her out for screwing Bernie over, and he's like, she's just another corporate candidate. We don't want someone like that. We want a real progressive, like a Jill Stein type person or a Bernie Sanders type person. That's who we want. And he gets crap from people on the left because they're like, people, it's your fault that Trump won because people like you bashing Hillary. And he's like, no, it's your fault for taking the most corporatist, you know, politician possible. That was the problem. It's not my fault, for being honest. You know, basically they're telling him, like, just... Yeah, I remember there was a video, you could look it up, it's hilarious. It's Michael Moore, before Hillary wins the nomination, just talking about how terrible she is. And then there he is, like, a month later, like, Hillary Clinton's so qualified, most qualified person ever. It's like, how do you sleep at night, you disgusting liars? Like, you know, willing to lie for the greater good, whatever, garbage. Jimmy Dore wasn't willing to lie. He's like, I have my values, I have my morals. I might disagree with a lot of his ideas, but he has them and he's stuck by him. Now he gets clamped on, like it's his fault. And there's other people on the left that it's the same thing. They just had to, you know, pinch their nose and swallow down Hillary Clinton. Well, no, they didn't want to. They thought it was crap. And so they're pointing out the corruption the DNC had against people like Bernie. They pointed out, you know, for example, this guy that was running as a progressive, which I did a video on in Dade County, where Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her buddy, I forget that lady's name, there's all these discrepancies in the ballots, and this guy twice now has lost, and they deleted all the ballots, so he wasn't able to have a ballot recount, as was legally supposed to be the case, but no one got criminally charged. You know, they point that stuff out. That's corruption of the Democratic Party. That's things that I applaud, because, you know, that's what I try to do as well. Try to point out when the party I'm with, or the party that I support, is corrupt or does something bad. Like, that's the mark of when you could look at yourself or the people close to you or the people you support and say, this is what's wrong with them. Then that, to me, it's like, yeah, here's a person that isn't interested in just playing the game and having their side win. They have ideals. You know, they have values that they're unwilling to compromise. That's good. That's the type of person, even if I disagree with them, like, I respect that. That's excellent. That's what upsets me about Bernie, because he got screwed over like that and just rolled over, you know? And other things with him, like he's a hypocrite the way he lives. He's, you know, telling us, you know, everybody needs to pay more, but, you know, he's taking all the tax breaks he can have. He has his second lake houses and things like that, but I digress from there. But it just, like, you see people, and Jimmy Dore, so he'll, like, point out, like, he was one of the first people I saw point out that was like, dude, how long have we been talking about Trump Tower meeting and Trump trying to get dirt on Hillary from Russians, and then we find out that Hillary's team lied for a year, that they paid a firm to get a foreign spy to go get dirt on Trump from Russians, from actual Kremlin agents, not just people pretending to be. And not only did they then actually get dirt, unlike Trump's team, they then used that dirt very successfully, including filtering it through Obama's State Department and the FBI, and it's still being used for these investigations. But we're led to believe by all the mainstream people, these supposed journalists, right, that no, that's not a big deal at all. Even the fact they lied about it for a year. If it was so innocent, why lie about it for a year? About paying for it. But we're led to believe, like, they want you to, it's like, did you ever watch the JFK movie? It's a good movie. Kevin Costner plays a lawyer, and, like, he has this famous line, like, towards the end of the movie, where they're talking about the magic bullet theory, and he's basically like, look, the government's able to bring in an expert that could explain to you how an elephant could hang off the side of a cliff with its tail tied to a daisy. Like, that, you could baffle people with enough BS that you're like, oh, okay, whatever. You know, I guess that sounds believable. But just on face value, why is it okay for one side to get dirt from Russians, but it's not okay from the other side? Why is it okay for one side to lie to the FBI, but not the other side? We know that Hillary's people lied to the FBI. No one charged. Why would it be okay for one side to destroy subpoenaed evidence, but not the other side? Why is it okay for certain people to lie to Congress, but not for others? If the Russia thing was the biggest deal ever, why did the Democrats and the DNC insist that the FBI not get physical access to their servers? Like, these are the kind of questions Jimmy Dore brings up. And he's like, look, when you put it all together, it's obvious because it's all garbage. Remember there was that undercover video where Van Jones, who used to work on CNN, who I actually don't mind. He said a lot of stuff that I really dislike, but he, at least to me, seems to be a critical thinker, you know? He like undercover someone's like gets him like crossing the street. It's like, what do you think about this whole Russia stuff? And he's like, that's all crap. They know it. They know it's crap. The special counsel was never going to prove that Trump actively worked with Russia. And like, it's so funny. You still see people holding on to that hope. They're like, the smoking gun's coming. The smoking gun's coming. But then you see the wiser people. They know what they're doing. They knew that it was always garbage. And they're like, look, Trump's a billionaire. You know, he's been involved in the Manhattan real estate business. There's some crime somewhere. And even if by some chance there's not, there's going to be enough shadiness that we could insert a crime. So all we need to do is get an excuse to overturn every area of his life. That's it. That's all we need. Let's raid his lawyer let's get an excuse to raid his lawyer in the middle of the night. Let's put his former campaign manager in solitary confinement for months on end. Let's do everything we can to get even if we can't prove a crime, we just need the innuendo that we could have our corporate media brothers go out there and spew this out every day. That's all we need. That's it. Let's get it out there, you know, and people eat it up. They eat it up, and they know. They'll tell you with a straight face, oh no, Russia collusion, we got to investigate Russia. It's a very serious thing. You know, Trump made it work with these. It'd be criminal not to investigate it. It'd be criminal. And now you're like, okay, so anyways, back to this Manafort, before he was ever with Trump, getting arrested for FARA violations working with the Podesta group who's connected to Hillary. What does this have to do with Trump Russia again? Oh, yeah, Trump Russia, whatever. Let's talk about Stormy Daniels, though, and like Trump's sex life, you know. Oh, great. Yeah, you're great. That's exactly, they knew that was the end game all along. They just lied. Maybe they had a hope that somehow there would be some, you know, 1 in a billion shot chance that, you know, actually Trump did work with Russians to steal the election. It just doesn't make sense on face value. Trump's actually had a more aggressive policy towards Russia than any president prior to him, and like since the Cold War. Now you might say, well, yeah, that's because his hand was forced because the Democrats claiming that he was a stooge of Russia. Well, two things. Wasn't that great then, the party of peace edging us closer to war just to win a political battle? That's great, right? And secondly, well, if that's true then, why wouldn't Putin be like, hey, you know what, Trump? Actually, I don't think you are going to have these sanctions. Actually, I don't think you are going to strike Syria. Because remember, I got all these tapes of you calling me in my office saying, let's steal the election, hack Hillary Clinton, and release this to your mouthpiece WikiLeaks. Wouldn't Putin do that? Instead, he's just like, nah, I'm going to roll over and take it despite that I have this evidence. Isn't that odd that he hasn't released any of that information? And yet Trump gets more and more, you know, had been going on a policy of being more and more aggressive towards Russia. It just blows the mind. You know, all these simple questions, and you're considered, you know, like a conspiracy theorist or some kind of crazy person. And what it is they throw so much information out there, and they have so many of their people just like nod their head and agree that the average person can't keep up with it. They're just like, oh, you know, like I said, you turn like the Kavanaugh thing, for example. You're the average person. You're probably, you know, maybe you watch your local news after dinner. Oh crap, they shut that bridge down. Better take a different way to work. Stuff like that or whatever. And maybe you want to hear a little national news, but basically you don't really care. How's your sports team doing? What's the weather? Oh, there's a war in this country. Oh, there's a bad hurricane. And yeah, that's terrible. That's it. That's your news. And then you're probably not watching CNN, Fox News. Some people do, but the average person, I don't know, is watching all that much. They're not reading the New York Times. Maybe it's late at night. And you're like, well, turn on a late night show. Get some comedy. And what do you got? You got Colbert and Fallon and Kimmel and Conan and, all of them are just one ideology. Just pushing that Trump is evil. Trump's the worst person in the world. Like they were all going on about how Kavanaugh insinuating that he was guilty. He's this sexual offender. Like the average person, like even my buddy Aaron, I was talking to him the other day. We did this video, and when we got off the video, he's like, oh, clearly you know way more about that Kavanaugh thing than me. It's like, yeah, because the media just pumped out this garbage. Like, he was hung up on, they didn't interview all the witnesses. They didn't interview all the witnesses. How could you leave that guy go in the court when all the witnesses weren't interviewed? That's not true at all. They interviewed every single person that was claimed to be a direct witness. Every single one, and all three of the women were like, no, I don't have any recollection of that. I can't back up that story. Now, most of them didn't say, I could prove that story's false. They just said, I have no recollection that occurred. So there's no physical witnesses. The people the media were screaming about that weren't witnesses were people that claimed to have heard secondhand, like, oh yeah, I remember a couple weeks later I was at a party and someone said Kavanaugh whipped it out at that other party. That's not a witness. That's hearsay. What are you going to do? Interview? Well, I guess I should be interviewed then in that case because I heard someone say that they heard someone say that Kavanaugh whipped it out. So I guess now I'm a witness too, right? All of us that watch someone say that on TV are witnesses now too. It's absolutely absurd. They interviewed the witnesses. None of them even remotely backed up the story. Now, had one of the witnesses been like, yes, I saw this happen, I saw him do this with Christine Blasey Ford, or I saw something shady going on, and I told a friend a week later, then yes, they should interview that friend to further buttress that claim. But when every single person's like, no. What are you supposed to do? But my friend, who's a very informed person, he didn't know that because it's just being shouted at you. The guy's guilty. He's a rapist. He's a rapist. He wasn't even accused of rape. Shut up. He's a rapist. He's a rapist. He's a rapist. Trump's the devil. Nuclear war. He's going to cause war. He's the worst person in the world. That's all you hear every day. And if you're just a regular person, you're like, I don't know what to think. You get tired of it. It's what happens. You're just like, I'm just tuning it out. Like, I don't have the time of day for it. But in your gut, you're like, this is garbage. It just is. So, I don't know. The double standards, the hypocrisy, the willingness to lie to follow your narrative. It's all good stuff. So, all right. Unless someone has a topic that I haven't hit on they would like me to talk about. I will say real quick, again, I will not be doing a live stream next Friday. And I'll probably be sparse with videos in general. Because the holidays are tough because I do home health care. I'm going to end up doing a lot of overtime. Because someone has to be there like 24... Yeah, I know, 2 hours. Someone's got to be there 24/7. So, but I am trying to get more consistent. I got a little bit new setup that I'm going to be having after Christmas. I'm going to try to do more like weekly videos in addition to the live stream. And I also want to try to be doing a better job of breaking the live stream up afterwards into either smaller videos or at least having timestamps so people could see, like maybe you just want to hear me blather on about Russia collusion, so you could skip through the boring immigration stuff or whatever. Or maybe you just want to skip through the end and just maybe see my dog or something and skip through all the boring me talking about anything. But, so yeah, that'll be coming up. But again, these next 2 weeks, it'll be pretty sketchy. My wife's birthday is actually New Year's Eve, so maybe we'll be going out. I don't know if we're going to do anything. And I'm going to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra tonight with my in-laws, so I think that'll be really fun. So, yeah, look forward to some new videos coming out after the new year. I'll still be trying to do the live stream. I might adjust the time. Friday's still good for me, but I might adjust the time because I think most people at work, it's hard for them to watch, so maybe I'll try to do that. But, yeah, any comments or questions? If anyone wants to get in touch with me, I know at least one person mentioned, if you would be willing to do a live stream or anything like that with me, or if you just want to do a regular video, and I mean anyone. Like, I've talked to people around here, they're like, I don't know anything about politics, so, like, what could I say? It's like, great, that's exactly the type of person that I would like to have on, right? For example, like, I want to get some people on that like work in the trucking industry that I know, just to talk about the recent changes in regulations with things like e-logs and how that's affected their lives, the pros and cons of it, and just let them talk about it. I'm not going to grill them on like, what do you think about, Trump or Russia or anything like that. So, and I don't have to show your face. I don't have to use your real name. It doesn't have to be live. That like I'm totally willing to accommodate. If I would do a video with anyone, particularly that wasn't a live stream, and you're unhappy with it, I would take it down. I would delete it. I'm not going to leave something up that, you think would jeopardize, your image or job prospects or anything like that. So I would be flexible like that. But yeah, I would like to get other people on. So I put on the chat there, I put my actual Gmail account up. It's just rob.nor@gmail. So you can get a hold of me anytime. And I know at least Drone Tech was on here. I don't know if he's still here, but mentioned wanting to do a live stream. I would love to do that. You should check out his channel as well. He was on the chat there. It's Drone Tech Politics. And he does a lot, like he's more polished than me. But he does a lot of like pro-Trump stuff, like criticizing the media and things of that nature. So it's worth checking out. He does a really good job. And I'm really thankful to him because my first live stream, it was just him and me on here. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And like, just like the size of my canvas and things like that. He really helped me out a lot. So, and that I'll put his YouTube name on the chat there in case you missed it. Yeah, for those of you that are on Above Top Secret, look, my favorite person to have discussions with is a person named Antediluvian. And the reason is he's a very intelligent person, and we're basically couldn't be more opposite on what we believe politically. Now, we obviously have some shared concerns, but I absolutely, like, we'll have these conversations on there where it's like, there's a system where you could star and flag posts that you like, so you kind of get an idea in general, how many people like a post or are reading it or something like that. Though I think secretly we all know a lot of it's kind of a popularity contest more than anything else. But it's still a decent barometer to see if people are paying attention. We will go through like thousands of words of discussions, me and someone like Antediluvian disagreeing on some minute detail, and no one's reading it. They're just like, whatever. Like they're arguing about this little detail about something. But I love it. That kind of detail and arguing something I really like. I would love to get him on here, or her. I guess I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but I don't know. I sent the invite out. I sent an invite out to a couple people, and honestly, I've been bad at trying to get back in touch with them just because the holiday season's been crazy, but it is something that I'll be trying to do in the future. There's other people that I want to get on that, for example, my time in the debate community, most of them are far more left-leaning than me, and are very intelligent people, like people that I disagree with, but I would respect. Of course, I'm smarter. I'm always right. But no, I think those would be worthwhile discussions to have, too. It's sad, though. You talk to a lot of people. A lot of people are afraid of being doxxed and things like that. So that's kind of crappy. It's a sad situation that we're in that type of situation. And I mean, one of my fears is I'm going to be running for office here. I do the home health care thing, but I have a master's degree in speech communication. I started putting my name in at places to possibly be a professor. And, I think these videos could harm my chances of that. One, just because I'm right-wing and academia tends to be left-leaning. And second, I heavily criticize academia. Now, having said that, as a professor, I would be upfront with what my biases are and do everything in my possibility. Like if I'm in a class where everyone's just agreeing with me, then you want to go the opposite way. You want to challenge people regardless. That's what academia is, right? Like you want to challenge people. So I still think I'd be a good if you're if you're watching this and considering hiring me at your university. I think I'd be great, So, but it's a worry you have, but yeah, it shouldn't be like. Yeah, I mean they'll be willing to discuss Trump ideas, the people I'd talk to. It's funny. Again, I say all the time, like Trump's kind of easy to peg, right? Like he wants to be popular, so I think the Democrats made a huge blunder where if they'd have just like kissed up to him out of the get-go instead of saying he was Hitler, I think that they could have got him to basically be in favor of a lot of positions they like DACA. Trump was probably totally willing to be like, yeah, man, we'll give citizenship to everyone in DACA, but we get this wall that I promised. I think he was willing to make that trade. That seems reasonable. And if your only argument against the wall is like, well, it'll cost a lot and not be effective, so what? Aren't you willing to spend that money to get citizenship for the people of DACA? You know? But, you know, instead it's just like, and it's the same thing, you know. Truthfully, the best job for me, if I didn't mind, like, profiting over, you know, my ideals would be, I ought to get hired by the Democratic Party. Because there's so many, like, they're so bad at going after Trump. Like, I could give them such good advice. Like, dude, stop insulting Trump voters. Like, if I'm the Democrat, that, like, this is what you say. You're like, I totally get it. We dropped the ball. As a party, we lost focus of what's really important, and that's working class people. And so we get you reaching out other places because things have not been going good for you in the working class. Wages have been pretty stagnant, you know. The rich are getting really rich, and what's really happening to you? And, you know, there's more burdens on you. And so we're here for you. We totally understand you trying to vote for an outsider, but we don't think Trump's good. And here's some of the policies we think are better that would help you more than Trump. That would do so much more than being like, well, half of your voters are deplorable. They're all secretly racist. It was a whitewash. Like, what do you think those people are going to then become Democrats? Of course not. You know, so, you know, I don't know. That's how, but those, yeah, so it's funny when I talk to, like, my friends that are Democrats, I'm always like, you know, you ought to convince people in the DNC to hire me. I wouldn't do it, though. I'll give them the free advice, you know. Treat people with dignity. What a concept, you know. Don't tell people that, and keep in mind, right, like, this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll head out, right, like, it's everyone, like, the people if you're serving, or you're just if you're serving people that voted for you, or if you're supporting one of the parties in whatever way, those people that voted against you, that hate you, you're still representing them, right? You shouldn't have contempt for them, you know? And it's just a bad thing. Remember, even the people that voted against you, you're supposed to be representing. They just had a difference of opinion. They didn't like you personally for whatever reason. That's okay. You know, don't go out and make fun of them. Don't go out and insult them. It's stupid. It's morally bad. It hurts the country, and it's strategically stupid. You know, you're going to have a tough time convincing people you called racist for 2.5 years, you know, to vote for your party all of a sudden in the next election. And you want them voting for you. So, I don't know, but, well, yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe if you like it. I put my email address up if you ever need to email me about anything. I encourage you to let other people know, just to check out my videos. It'd be nice. I'm really excited. I almost got 200 subscribers in like a 6-month period. I think that's pretty good. I'm pretty excited with that. So, yeah, thanks a lot to everyone that helped me out in that venue. And I hope you have a great New Year and happy holidays. And I look forward to seeing people after the New Year. So, thanks again. Have a good one, everyone.